15 of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order. We'll start out with citizens forum. Before we get any farther, I want to please ask everyone, both on the Planning Commission and who's going to speak tonight, to please talk into the microphone. We've had requests from the home audience to please speak into the microphone. Citizens forum first. Anyone who has something, a question or comment that's not related to an item on the agenda, at this time you can come up and tell us. Or if anybody on the Planning Commission has a question or comment. Mark, do you have anything?
No.
Okay. Then we'll move along to the approval of the agenda. Nothing.
I have no deletions or modifications.
Okay. No. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of the minutes, October the 15th, 2015 minutes. Have any questions or comments about that? All those in favor say aye.
But, yeah.
Well, I'm moving right along here. All those in, we have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
One abstain.
Aye. Discussion and public hearing on a final plat for Phase 2 of the Briarstone subdivision, formerly Villas at Anchor Park subdivision property, located on the north side of Turkey Creek Road across from Anchor Park. A portion of Parcel 59 and Parcel 59.01, Tax Map 152. Saddlebrook Properties, LLC, applicant.
This plat was before you last month and was recommended for postponement due to due to the status of the field items at that time. At this time, based on the significant amount of work that they actually were able to achieve since I went out there earlier this week, and I'll pass around some photographs that actually were taken by a drone that's owned by the grading contractor to kind of show you. They actually have gotten the base, the binder down and the curbing down. So the staff does feel that in the field they are far enough along to have the plat be considered. You can see in those pictures that they've made a very good effort at stabilization, although obviously they still have some work to do, particularly in the rights of ways. This particular final plat is only a portion of what was originally part of the preliminary plat for Phase 2. It includes 14 house lots and one open space lot. And the staff would recommend approval of this final plat subject to the items that are at your places, which do include the completion of the remaining field items. So items A through M. And just, again, let me make it clear that as with any final plat, the town staff and the Secretary of the Planning Commission will not be able to sign off on the plat that would allow it to get recorded until all the field items are completed, to the requirements of the town. And so with that being noted, again, the staff would recommend approval of the final plat.
Can I ask a quick question? What happened with the trees? How'd you guys end up resolving that?
That actually is in Phase 3
Okay.
of Briarstone. Yeah. I did meet with Russ out there, and we did look at that. There would be one pretty large hackberry tree that would have to be removed.
Okay.
And we have worked out, I think, a replacement. I think we were going to add back 4 new shade trees on open space property that is in Briarstone,
okay.
Probably along a walking trail section. So yeah, that.
I'm Russell Rackley with Rackley Engineering, representing the applicant, and was the engineer on the project. And we don't have a problem with any of staff's comments, and would respectfully ask for final plat approval subject to those conditions. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Anyone have any questions?
I'll move for approval with the subject twos.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Discussion and public hearing on a final plat for Phase 2 of the Cottages at Price Farms subdivision, parcel 047, Group C, tax map 162B, and parcel 8.01, tax map 162, 23.94 acres, 34 lot, zoned R-1 OSMR, Robert G. Campbell and Associates applicant.
This final plat was also presented last month and postponed because of the incomplete status of the field items. The staff has visited the site, and this is what the section that includes Phase 2. Phase 2 is 34 lots. Mostly would be attached. There will be some detached on the south side of Price Farm Boulevard. And in terms of the field items, they have continued to make good progress. This is what it looked like on Tuesday. They've got the binder, have had the binder down and surface course down for some time, and you can see the stabilization. They've done a pretty good job with that. So the staff would recommend approval of the plat for Phase 2, subject to the items A through H that are at your places.
I'm Garrett Tucker with Robert Campbell and Associates, yeah, they've made quite a bit of progress. We've addressed all the comments regarding the plat, and we don't have any problem with the conditions. And as Mark said, you know, these will be completed before the plat can be ultimately signed off on and recorded. So we're good with that.
Okay, anybody have any questions or comments?
I'll move for approval with the subject twos.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Discussion and a public hearing on a final plat for Phase 3 of the Cottages at Price Farm subdivision, parcel 04247, zone Group C, tax map 162B, and parcel 8.01, tax map 162, 16.76 acres, 22 lots, zoned R-1 OSMR, Robert G. Campbell and Associates applicant.
This phase is, as you can see there, on the very south end of Cottages at Price Farm, and this would complete this particular development. This is, I think these are all going to be detached lots. There's 22 in this particular phase, and since this actually ties in with Phase 2, the pictures that were shown earlier basically include this phase, so they're very far along in terms of the field items, and the staff would recommend approval of the plat for Phase 3, subject to the items that are at your places, A through G.
Have any questions or comments?
No, we're good with these conditions.
You're good, okay. Any questions or comments from anyone on the Planning Commission or in the audience?
I'll move for approval with the subject twos.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose?
Thank you very much.
Discussion and public hearing on the final plat for McKinley Station subdivision located at 421 Everett Road, portion of parcel 104, tax map 141, zoned R-1 OSR, 32 lots, 15.385 acres, Saddlebrook Property LLC applicant.
For those that may not be familiar, this is off of Everett Road. It's actually in the area that's under construction, so it's a little bit challenging to get to it. It does back up to part of Fox Run. It includes 32 house lots, and as noted in the original staff recommendations, they were a little bit behind on the field items in this particular subdivision. That's roughly what it looked like on Tuesday. My understanding from our engineering staff and the applicant is that they will have the binder down and the curbing down by early next week. All the utilities except for gas are in, and gas is a chronic last-minute utility. I mean, they always come in, very late in the game. So It's kind of your call on that. The site is pretty well stabilized, similar to the other two plats that were before you. But as you can see, it was a little bit further behind than Briarstone. But if you do choose to, take action on it, the staff would condition the approval on the remaining comments that are at your places and the understanding that the staff could not, sign off on the plat until all the field items were satisfactorily corrected.
Mark, how long will it take to do the road and the curbing?
I
can
will
speak to
defer to their engineer. Maybe he could give you a better answer than I could.
I'm Russ Rackley again, representing the applicant. And just to clarify, in that photo you're looking at, the muddy road you see in the foreground is actually the town's Everett Road project. Our project starts where the stone is. We were actually scheduled to pave start paving yesterday afternoon. We're going to have curbs down tomorrow, but obviously the rain event has put us behind, and now we need to let the stone cure to the town standards for a couple of days. So we'll be putting binder down on Monday, curbs on Tuesday. Let the curb set up. That'll put us into the holidays. And so we'll have binder and curb down before the holidays, and then after the holidays we'll be able to backfill curb. All of the utilities and services are in. KUB Gas self-performs the work. That developer agreement has been signed and paid in full. So KUB's paid. They would, for all purposes, sign the plat tomorrow because they've been paid. But they insist to wait until curbs are backfilled before they come in and trench in their gas line. So that's what he was referring to as far as them being a chronic issue. We still can't convince them to come in earlier in the process. But we would respectfully ask, and I made an argument last month regarding the prior project as far as being on the edges of being complete, and with the 7-day forecast of sunshine and mild temperatures, there is no reason whatsoever that this project can't be, by this time next week, as complete or more so than Briarstone is today. Again, we had it scheduled out thusly, but that heavy rain we got yesterday afternoon has set us back, and we could pave tomorrow, but that would be not the best thing because of the moisture content of the base stone. After that rain event, you really need to let it dry for a few days to let it set up, let the lime in the mix set up a little bit before you put the binder down. But we would respectfully ask approval, subject to staff comments, and the understanding that no plat signatures would come until it is substantially complete to the town's typical standards of approving a final plat for recording.
I would make one more note that I'd sent over to the surveyor and Russ this afternoon one other comment dealing
Yes.
with the setback off of Everett Road that they needed to modify on the plat. They understand that, so
Yeah.
I would just add that as letter P in the subject twos, and just showing a 40-foot setback, front yard setback from the Everett Road right-of-way instead of 30-foot.
Yeah. And we're okay with that. I actually had it designed that way, and through the plan production process, it was labeled as the minor arterial setback instead of a major arterial setback. So.
And you're okay with all the rest of the comments?
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
several comments here.
One question only, is that if it was delayed to the next meeting, would that impact any of your work?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
More questions or comments?
I'm going to ask a question. This is more to you, Mark. Last month we dealt with a few, and it seemed like the stabilization wasn't in place yet, and that was our biggest concern. It seems like stabilization seems to be a more subjective thing, maybe, as far as the appearance of it, how much of grass has grown, whereas this one, the stabilization is in. It seems the rest of it is pretty clear cut. If you don't have all your curbing in, if you don't have your roads in, if you don't have the gas in, they're not going to sign off. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, the stabilization, our standard is pretty objective, actually.
Okay.
We require that 90% of the area that's been disturbed to be in a uniform, thick, uniform stand of perennial grass.
Okay.
So you know,
I guess what my question is if we approve this, we're kind of putting this on, essentially on Darrell to follow up, and are we putting some pressure on him?
well, I mentioned that last month, and that is always a concern, and that's why I mentioned with the other two plats, certainly the Briarstone plat, that, you know, that it needs to be very clear that the staff nor the Secretary of the Planning Commission can sign off on the plat until the field items and any other subject twos are satisfactorily taken care of. We certainly don't want a situation where someone references that the Planning Commission approved it on such and such a date, and it puts unnecessary pressure on the town engineer to feel, you know, kind of like he needs to move on the plat when the field items may not have advanced, you know, very far since the approval. So that's why I would certainly make that clear, you know, as part of this consideration that we do expect the field items to be taken care of, and all the other subject twos before we'll be able to sign off on the plat. And I think the applicant certainly understands that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just like to add, I mean, you know, to get the development permit, y'all have an equation engineering does for a letter of credit for erosion control and stabilization. Even when they sign the plat and it's ready to record, the town holds a letter of credit for at least 12 months, if not 24 months. I know the road letter of credit's 24 months, to give the town of Farragut the monetary security that if for any reason the stabilization doesn't take, if it dies, or if it's some small area that wasn't complete at that time, that it will be. The incentive is there for the developer to do it, and if he fails to do it, the town has 1.5 times the amount of money it would take to perform that work. So the security is there. We're not asking to bend any rules or anything. It's just that we will be complete. You know, in a week we'll be able to backfill curbs. In 2 weeks it'll be, you know, ready. In my opinion, ready to the point that is the typical standard that staff is ready to produce final bond amounts. We produce those letter of credits for those bond amounts, and then the plat moves forward. So.
Well,
No,
Mark-
just a brief comment. I was really a stickler on those other ones last month. And, you know, I'm a big fan of getting things done properly. But I can see the difference that this project is further ahead.
Correct.
Even though there's some items that aren't completed, you can see they're ready to be done. I appreciate your explanation. You've earned my trust coming through on the previous projects and based upon Mark's comments earlier. So I don't want anybody to think I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth from last month to this month, but I do have a comfort level on this project with what I'm seeing. So.
Well, that was going to be my comment about how much farther along the stabilization is from what we were seeing for the two projects last month.
Yeah, that's true. It was very raw last month.
Those two were
Particularly Briarstone.
right.
I can give you some numbers. There was 11.5 acres of disturbed area on this project, and as of today, there's 2.8 acres that is not stabilized. That's basically from the front setback to the curb, where we have to, once the curbs are in, we have to work that area to backfill the curbs. The remaining of the site is either the green grass you see or has been recently sowed with grass, and that was an area we left open to waste excess trench dirt spoils. We had to leave an area to place and spread that material around until all the utilities were completed. The rest of it was sowed with grass 4 weeks ago. The fill slopes on the back of the property that is the area that could drain off-site to the creek were sowed with grass 3 months ago. They actually need to be mowed. I mean, they're getting pretty tall back there. The pond was sodded. It's fully stabilized. This site has been a phenomenal site throughout the process. We've not had a single issue on this site, and so at the moment it's 75% stabilized. Within a week to 10 days, we'll have the rest of it sowed, and then it's just hope the ground temperatures stay cold enough to have good grass germinate rather than the quick winter rye that germinates in colder temperatures. And so I think this project, to me, is a sure thing, especially with the next 10-day forecast that it's going to be complete.
I would like to make a motion. Oh, go ahead.
Question, go ahead.
Mark, you said about adding item P.
Last one.
Yeah, let's see here.
The O.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
you're right.
Item O regarding the setback from Everett Road.
Yep.
Yeah, I know, no, I just want to make sure.
No, you're right.
We're adding
Yeah, I
O, not a
misstated
P.
that. Yep.
I want to make a correction, yeah. Get the right,
I
at
was looking at another subject too, I think.
least my alphabet, that's what comes down.
There you go.
I'm old school.
Not the,
Go ahead.
not the new
Ron.
alphabet, the old alphabet.
Approval with the subject twos, including the addition of subject to O that was mentioned. And then the condition that the town staff and secretary of the planning commission will not sign off on the plat until all required field work, including stabilization, has been completed to the town standards as acknowledged in writing by the town staff.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Be
Thank you
looking
very
forward to
much.
that road next week.
Me too. Thank you.
Item number 8, discussion and public hearing on the final plat of lots 42, 43, and 62 at the Battery at Berkeley Park, located at the intersection of Prince George Parish Drive and Cotton Blossom Lane. Parcels 42, 43, and 62, tax map 142A, Group D, zoned R-1, OSR 2.213 acres, Benchmark Associates applicant.
This plat is really a plat of correction. It's being provided to correct a front yard setback violation for a house that's under construction on Lot 42. I'll point that out here.
You read it on the screen. There.
That southernmost lot is Lot 42. The contractor made an error in laying out the house, and basically what was to be a front entry garage is going to have to be a side entry garage. And in order to have the space to enter it from the side, the north side, they're going to have to shift the property line of the lot that's to the north of this, which is also owned by the same person that owns Lot 42. And then in order to free up enough developable, buildable space on that adjusted lot, Lot 43, they're going to have to shift a little sliver of an open space lot, which is this area right there. That little triangle area would become part of Lot 43 and be removed from the open space. The subdivision has quite a bit more open space than is required, so they do have the land to be able to lose the open space. There is about a 75-foot section of an existing walking trail that is in that open space that would have to be removed and relocated, and it would be moved to basically in that direction there, just to the northeast of Lot 43. And all that has been approved by the developer who still owns the open space in this particular subdivision. So that's kind of the background of why they're here. As mentioned in the staff recommendations, the town would not be able to issue a certificate of occupancy for that house that's under construction until this plat is recorded. It was also mentioned that we would want to see that trail removed and relocated prior to the recording of the plat. I think the surveyor would like to request that also be tied to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy, which I'm probably fine with that. I just want them to go ahead and get that trail issue addressed before it gets cold and it becomes difficult due to weather. With that being stated, and however you want to deal with the walking trail, whether you want to hold that to the recording of the plat or the issuance of a certificate of occupancy is really up to you all. But with that noted, we would recommend approval of this plat subject to the conditions A through C.
Mark, is that walking trail already constructed?
Yes, it has been out there for a few years. And where they're moving it to will be steeper. It will be a steeper approach to Prince George Parish Drive. I don't think it'll exceed 20%, which is the maximum slope for a walking trail, but it'll be a tough bicycle ride.
We've got few of those trails that are kind of sneaky for bicyclists, so all of a sudden you got a
Yeah.
steep.
Yeah, that slope does concern me a little bit. It's pretty steep.
Are you satisfied with the way the subject twos are written here as far as the walking trail, as to which direction we were to tie it to?
Well, he's platted the easement along the northeast edge of Lot 43, basically where that blue line is. So it would be basically parallel with that side property line. That's one of the concerns, I guess, with not taking care of the trail, because we may end up with a situation where the trail may need to have some meander to it for grade purposes, and then the easement would have to be modified. So it could be something that the surveyor could stake out in the field and then have our engineering staff to take a look at it, or maybe me, to see if that would be acceptable. But it's going to be a pretty steep approach.
I'm Benny Mormon with Benchmark Associates, 10308 Hardin Valley Road. The home builder who owns the lot and has a contract on the lot to the north of it, lot 42 or 43, he would respectfully ask that you approve the plat and allow him to get the plat recorded so that the transfer of properties between himself and the developer can take place. It is understood, one, that he cannot get a certificate of occupancy on either house until this plat is recorded and the walking trail is in place. He is aware of that. It's just a logistics thing with the developer. He is in and out of town a tremendous amount. So that is why he would like to get the one thing that Mark mentioned about not being able to record the plat. He's fine with not being able to get his CO until the walk's done, which is going to be the driving force for him to get the walk done. As far as the grade on the walk, I would be more than happy to not only stake that for town engineer to look at, but provide him the existing grade that is there, because that's what it's going to follow, to ensure in advance before this plat is recorded that the walk will be built where the easement is platted. And that's a process I could have done this week.
So Mark, if we went with your comment about not getting the CO until the walking trail was done, would we need to add some language to item B here then, to state that? Or is that?
Item A, let's see.
Yeah.
Or to, well, you could change that from prior to the recording of the final plat. You could say prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for lot 42, the walking trail section must be relocated in consultation with town staff, something like that.
And Mark, that's what we actually agreed to on the front end before we started platting. I mean, that's what the developer knew he had ahead of him, and it prevents it assures the town that the trail will be done, because he's not going to sit on a house and not be able to sell it and put somebody in it.
What are we, I know, let me understand this straight. With the trail being relocated, it is at such a angle that it's going to make it difficult if you're riding a bike not to lose it at the end, trying to not run into cars. Is that what I'm hearing?
It would be a steeper approach, yeah, if you're coming
Okay.
up to Prince George Parish Drive. If you're on a bicycle, it would definitely be more challenging than where it's at right now.
Okay. Do we have the ability to ask that it be curved so that is, because it's one thing when you're adult, but kids will go that,
Yeah,
they think that's a
no.
free ride, and then all of a sudden they're getting hit by cars.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, but that would affect where he plats his easement, of course.
And
'cause his easement.
I think it's important to note that that's an incline up. It's not like kids are going to be coming off a hill and into the road. It's
Okay.
going to be slowing them down.
Okay.
They'd probably be walking their bike up that one.
So
Okay.
it's not a
Now, it
safety
might
issue.
be
All
a
right,
bit
all
of
right.
a,
I'm
it might be
confused on
kind
which
of a
way it's,
dangerous
It's coming
riding
up.
down it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you go down it pretty steeply and then you have to turn toward the south.
Okay.
That could be a little bit challenging.
live in Knoxville, I mean, there's hills everywhere. It's,
But that would be a concern of mine as well, as safety. And in this case, it's going to slow them down
Okay.
going out into
Yeah,
traffic.
if they're going up, yeah, it would be,
okay.
yeah, it'd be tough.
I'd like to move for approval with the, subject to B with the recommended change in the language that Mark stated just a minute ago.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
You've got your wording down there, Mark.
Yeah.
Item number 9, discussion and public hearing on a final plat for the Donat B. and Cornelia Lucia property, parcel 33.02, tax map 142, 12401 Union Road, zoned R-1, 1.4 acres, and a variance request from the subdivision regulation requirement to construct sidewalks and other pedestrian facilities on Smith Road and Union Road, and provide a 10% open space. Benchmark Associates Incorporated applicant.
Okay, this one has kind of a lot going on. Normally, this kind of plat would be something that the staff could administratively handle and the Secretary of the Planning Commission approve. But where an applicant is requesting a variance from the subdivision regulations, that actually has to go to the Planning Commission, and you would need to act separately on each of the two variance requests associated with this. This property is, as you can see, at the intersection of Union and Smith. Both of those streets are classified as collector on the major road plan. So the process of subdividing the property does require pedestrian facilities to be constructed along the frontage of those two streets. However, due to the minor nature of this subdivision, the applicant is requesting a variance from that requirement. Also related to the minor nature of this subdivision, the applicant's requesting a variance from the requirement to dedicate 10% of the area as open space. One thing that the staff pointed out in the write-up, that by approving this plat, you would be creating a situation where access for Lot 2 there to the south, when someone comes in for a building permit, they're going to have to get a variance from the driveways and other access ways ordinance, because no matter where they put an access there, it's going to be well within 200 feet of other accesses, both on each side of Union Road, because the access would likely be, it's going to be somewhere in that general area, perhaps. So as you can see, on both sides of the road, they are within 200 feet of the existing access to the south on the same side of the road, and well within that in relation to the access that's on the east side of Union Road. So that's something to think about. The process of creating this subdivision is creating a variance to some other aspect of the town's requirements. It would only be one house lot. It's not like it's a huge amount of traffic, but it is something that they would have to go through that process.
How is the site through there? Is there any problem?
Site distance?
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I haven't really, I mean, there is a curve, as you can see, to the south if you're going toward the north. But
Coming uphill there, too.
it does kind of have a straightaway section there. I mean, you could always, you could recommend getting rid of the existing access on Union on Lot 1, but that really still doesn't help you in relation to the need for a variance, because you're still going to need one from the other two accesses that are on Union Road.
That a big, is 124048, is there a house on that lot, or is that an empty lot?
There's a house on it, but it's off the picture.
Okay.
All right, well, maybe there's not. I can't remember.
I think, isn't that the one that kind of, didn't they separate a
That
lot?
might be the Marion plat that came
That's
before
what I
you all.
thought.
Yeah.
There's a,
Yeah,
yeah,
then,
this is an empty lot. I'm wondering, is it, because they're going to need, they don't have a house there, they don't have access. I'm just thinking out loud, where they would put access for their driveway. They would either meet it up with this driveway that we see at 12405.
to line it up maybe on the south edge of that
Yeah.
lot.
So that at least we're kind of trying to line up driveways somewhere. Yeah.
So that it would line up with wherever that may occur.
Yeah.
Yeah, it still would,
It's still a
need a
tough-
variance,
Yeah.
from the Kelly property to the south, and then the existing driveway on 12402.
From a safety standpoint, how bad is that, or is it?
I don't know. I really haven't assessed it in that regard. I don't know if Benny's looked at it or not. I just haven't really looked at it.
Benny Mormon, Benchmark Associates, 10308 Hardin Valley Road. From my field inspection, I did not see it as being a safety issue. I do feel like that we would have sight distance obtained at the time of placing a driveway. There may be some vegetation there now that would prevent that, but that would be definitely taken care of at the time of getting a building permit for a residence on the lot. And as far as staff's comments, we're in agreement with all their terms. We would respectfully ask that you approve this plat, subject to those comments.
Traffic.
I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Traffic
Betty.
should get better on Union Road when Everett Road is completed, shouldn't it?
Yeah. That was going to be my point.
I would think more people would use Union, yes.
No, Everett.
I mean, Everett.
Once Everett gets fixed.
More people would
especially-
use
yeah.
Everett, yeah.
Smith.
Yes, they would be probably more likely to use Everett, yeah.
And that road, Union Road, that part of Union Road, there's a lot of houses on that street and a lot of different, with driveways. It's more like a neighborhood, not within a neighborhood.
And if the access on the Lot 1 were further south, then I would have certainly recommended an access easement, joint access easement
Yeah.
with Lots 1 and 2. But in this case, their access is up closer to Smith, and it would not really make a lot of sense to run a driveway parallel to Union to connect to that existing access, which is frankly in a worse location than where the access for Lot 2 would be.
Benny, I have an observation. Is your client aware that, assuming you the house that's built on Lot 2 was at the same front yard setback off of Union Road as the house on Lot 1, that by the time you take your 40-foot combination setbacks, that your house would only be 37 to 38 feet wide?
He is.
Okay. I mean, it's unbelievably narrow. Not impossible, just
It's more of homes comparable to what's being built behind Town Hall back here. I mean, it is definitely a different style of home, but it's more of a Charleston-style home that's deep and narrow.
The other observation I have is that if my memory serves correct, in R1, in this combination 40-foot setback, you have a minimum of 15 and the balance on the other side.
Yes.
And what I'm seeing is here, I'm seeing a setback on Lot 1 that's going to be less than 15 feet. So we're creating a situation of a lot that is.
That's one of staff's conditions, is that we move that line, actually extend that line that's coming parallel to the house back far enough to where when it does cut at the angle, we will be at 15 feet. That's one of his comments.
That's going to even further affect that narrow house. I mean, it's going to squeeze
It's
a
not-
little bit, not a lot, but maybe a foot, but it might squeeze a little bit more out of that house.
Actually, those two lines are almost parallel, so all it's doing is.
So you're
Yes.
saying you're that 77.8, if I'm reading it correctly. It might be 77.0. I can't really tell on mine. You're saying that's pretty consistent on that width all the way back.
Yes.
And then my final question, there's a funny little panhandle that's left back there. What was the purpose of that?
The zoning ordinance requires that no lot can be more than 3 times the lot width. So the lot depth cannot be more than 3 times the lot
Okay.
width. We actually were, before BZA, trying to get a variance to keep that from being there, and we were not successful.
It's just squirrely.
I agree
It's going to be
100%.
difficult to explain to somebody in 30 years why your neighbor's property is behind you and it's not yours.
Yes, sir.
So,
I
okay.
agree.
Okay, so you've already been to BZA and it didn't work out, and unfortunately this board doesn't have the power to do anything different.
Yes, sir.
But that explains it. Thank you.
I still have a question, Mark.
Yes, sir.
Where's that
I'll
steep
defend the
pitch?
BZA's
Where's that
action on
steep
that,
pitch?
by the way, because this is a self-induced variance. It's a self-created variance, and the BZA made the right decision, in my opinion. Yes, sir.
Mark, because I can't see it here on the drawing, where's that steep pitch up to Union up to Everett start? Is right about where that driveway is, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Talking about.
It's that steep. I mean, it's steady. It's not.
Relatively steep pitch up to Everett Road there.
Most of that is up closer to the intersection. I don't think it would be in front of the smaller lot.
I just couldn't tell from here is how, because that, if you had the driveway coming in about where that pitch goes, it would be really a hazardous place.
Right. I think most of that is to the northwest.
Mark, on this item, we actually have 3 separate pieces to vote on. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct. Yep. And they would need to be voted on, like you said, separately. Yep.
And in a certain sequence?
You would probably want to do the variances first because they relate to the plat. So you could take the pedestrian facility variance and then the 10% and then the plat.
Madam Chairman, I believe you have another citizen that would like to speak.
My name's Dennis Dean. I live at 12715 Union Road. The problem that I see with this is that part of Union Road is relatively narrow. The Smiths Road side, I don't see an issue, but as you come up the Union Road hill, you're coming uphill and also making a right-hand turn in front of the house right as you top the hill. This is going to create a dangerous driveway coming out in a blind spot. For that reason, I really think you need the sidewalk and the space that goes with that to improve the sight distance. If you get a couple of bushes and shrubs there, you will not see the cars, and contrary to what people say, 45, 50 mile an hour through there is not totally unreasonable. They do, it is unreasonable, but they do it.
Yes.
Let's say it that way.
It's not unheard of.
Questions or comments?
And to address his concern, the front yard setback would keep any structure from being in that area. As far as vegetation, I don't think my client would have an issue with making sure that all vegetation would be low-growth vegetation up within the sight distance area.
Benny, is it possible, we're a little bit cart before the horse, but I'm thinking about what Mr. Dean said. Is it possible that they could design the house and the driveway where somebody could pull out nose first into Union Road instead of having to back out rear end first into Union Road?
Oh, I would highly recommend a turnaround be in place before they come out. On the lot, and that is something, typically with a long, narrow home like this, your garages, those are typically serviced by alleys, and the garage is to the rear, and with that area protruding out there, that'll make a good area for a turnaround.
So what your thought is that you would have a driveway next to the house that would go into the backyard and then turn around and park in the garage.
Make for a turnaround
and then
area
that way when
at the
somebody
garage.
leaves, they're going to go out nose first.
Yes, sir. And if you don't do that, there's nothing wrong with putting a turnaround in front of the house, but that wouldn't be as appealing. I more envision it being in the rear.
Is that something, Mark, that this body would even have the power to include as a restriction on this?
Probably not. I mean, that could be looked at as part of the access request, I would think.
And I would just, if it was me, I would just absolutely be terrified to back
Oh,
out
yeah,
onto Union Road.
I can't imagine anybody even wanting to do that, even if you could. It would not make any sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same thing with the keeping the vegetation down. We don't have any authority to require that either.
Well, we do have, we've got some
we?
visibility provisions in our zoning ordinance and municipal code, that we could address. Were the front yard impeded with vegetation, where it created a safety issue, we could address that
Do
potentially.
we need to do that at this point?
No, I mean, it's, those things are, addressed, basically they're pretty much addressed by citizen request. But it would be a good idea for whoever builds on that lot to be cognizant of that, because it would benefit them. They're going to be accessing the road as much as anybody.
Well, and quite frankly, if it's in the right-of-way, it's fair game to the right-of-way mower.
Yeah, I mean, if it's in the right of way, it could be.
And as far as the edge of asphalt, you can see on my drawing where the drive for the existing house, where we're showing the edge of that drive, that's because that's a concrete surface tying to an asphalt. So there is a good bit of right-of-way between the edge of asphalt and the property line.
I can appreciate the comments made about the sidewalk and on that road, but and it's going to be a while, but I think we're better off to wait to put any pedestrian facilities on that stretch of road until we have a master plan done for that road entirely.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a few years down the road, I understand that. But I'm just not a big fan of putting stuff in, knowing that we're probably going to have to rip it out and redo it in a few years. So that's just a comment for me. Are you ready to have a stab at it?
Questions or comments? Anybody in the audience have any more questions or comments? Okay.
I'm going to move for approval of the first variance, which is a request to not construct pedestrian facilities at this time.
When you do these variances, if we could state a reason, and I can put those in the minutes, like due to the minor nature of the subdivision, or, that it could be an issue with future road improvements.
I'll go with the statement that I made. That
Okay.
I think we're better off to wait until we have the master plan done for that section of the road.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what the words you put in there.
I would prefer, Ed,
feel that if you're going to wait.
that we would wait to put pedestrian facilities there until we have a master plan laid out for that road.
Well, I'd also like to know who's going to pay for it and ensure that the
I think it's already in the CIP
owner of
through
the owner of
2018.
the land pays for that.
I understand where you're coming from, but I think they're kind of separate issues.
Well, then I won't vote for it.
We haven't typically, tried to make a single lot owner pay pay for the improvement.
Yeah, it's a lot of frontage. I mean, it would be
Subdivision.
a substantial expense to do it. I mean, we'd love to have it. Obviously, it'd be great if they would put a sidewalk in along all that frontage. But then we have to refer back to the, Supreme Court guidance that we have with rough proportionality, rational nexus, those kinds of things, so that the action, that the action being requested is proportionate to, what's before you. And with a minor two-lot subdivision, typically, we wouldn't expect such a significant expense.
It's very consistent with what we've done in the past.
Yes.
On these minor
It would
subdivisions.
be.
Basically, you're saying the town gets to pay for that when it's done.
Yeah, very likely.
I think it's already budgeted. I think that Board Man Alderman, right.
The portion of the sidewalks that are a requirement of the property owner to put in, you transferring the payment, the cost of that to the town.
Yes, but that's pretty consistent with all the other minor subdivisions that we've approved over the years. And quite frankly, I think it'd be cheaper. The odds of of the applicant getting it in the correct spot of when all the engineering is done on Union Road.
I'm
Right.
not saying it has to be done now, I'm just looking for where it gets funded.
Right. I understand.
So we have a motion that's hanging there at the moment.
I'll second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
You got the 10%.
And I'll make
Open
a
space.
recommendation to approve the variance to not provide the 10% open space at this time due to the minor nature of the subdivision.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
And the third action would be the plat, subject to letter A being addressed.
Make a motion accordingly.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Discussion and public hearing on a final plat for the VAC DA property, parcel 2, tax map 153, 624 Red Mill Lane, zoned R-1, 2.91 acres, and a variance request from the subdivision regulations and requirements to construct a sidewalk and other pedestrian facilities on Red Mill Lane and provide for a 10% open space. Stan Hines, applicant.
This one is somewhat similar to the previous item. It does have a couple of variance requests. It is a minor two-lot subdivision. Just a little background on this one. A few years ago in the R1 zoning district, there was a provision in there that someone could request a special exception to add a second dwelling unit on the same lot. And that's what happened on this particular lot. The house to the north there was constructed after approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals. But then that provision was taken out of the R1 zoning district. And really, it would have been fine to have kept using both houses as approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals a number of years ago. But I think they're selling the property, and I believe for title purposes, they're requesting that the houses be on their own separate lots. So that's why this is coming before you. Since it does front on a collector street, Red Mill Lane, they would need to request a variance from the requirement to construct pedestrian facilities along that frontage, and then also for the 10% open space. As you can see, they do have a platted access easement that would be in favor of both lots, so there wouldn't be any new accesses permitted on Red Mill Lane. They would keep coming out at the same shared access point that they have been. And the staff would support the variances due to the minor nature of the subdivision.
Applicant.
Well, I appreciate it if you approve it, and we like to respect them.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
Here again, we have three separate items, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll make a recommendation to approve the first variance to not construct pedestrian facilities at this time due to the minor nature of the subdivision.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Oppose?
I will then make a motion to approve the variance to not provide the 10% open space at this time due to the minor nature of the subdivision.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose?
Plat. The plat itself, yeah.
And then I'll make a motion to approve, would this be the final, like, motion for the final plat, correct? Yeah, for the final plat.
Yes.
I did.
Motion. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Thank you.
Thank you very
Got
much.
the rest of
Thank
this
you.
meeting, Ron. Just get them all in until you leave.
You won't hear from me in January. You won't hear from me.
I was just wondering what we're going to do without you. Making motions.
Yes, I'm listening very hard.
Number 11, discussion and public hearing on a final plat for the Ben Boring property, parcel 78.1, tax map 142, 200 Boring Road, zoned R-1, 9.4 acres, and a variance request from the subdivision regulations requirement to construct sidewalks and other pedestrian facilities on Boring Road and to provide a 10% open space. Ryan Lynch, applicant.
Well, this sounds like a broken record, but this one has similar issues. But this is basically up Boring Road where Boring Road and Boring Lane fork there. And they're requesting to create two lots from a current piece of parcel that's a little over 9 acres. This came before you last month, I believe, for rezoning. And the lower lot, the southern lot, would be going to R1. That's been approved on first reading by the Board of Mayor and Alderman. The Lot 2 would remain in its current zoning designation as R2. The staff comments are at your places. There's a lot of things to really think about on this piece of property, many of which, in the staff's opinion, would come in the future. But we didn't want approval of this plat to preclude possible connections at some future date, because if you look at the comprehensive land use plan, there are connections that come up through that access easement, and then certainly from Dixie View, which is in Country Manor. Let me highlight that, and then to the property to the east. Dixie View is up here that stubs out into this property. And then at some future date, if Lot 2 were ever further subdivided, certainly the staff would recommend a connection to the east because this property is undeveloped. And that's actually shown on the land use plan. And then this access easement that's being platted as part of this plat may, depending on what happens with how Lot 2 develops or future conditions, could transition to a walk and trail access easement. That would be dependent on whether it made sense in the future date, potentially. But then certainly if Lot 2 were further subdivided, there would need to be a plat note and a covenant, which would be noted on the plat, that the walking trail, there would be a walking trail constructed along the Boring Road frontage, because Lot 2 is pretty large, and it's likely someday it will be subdivided further, and that process would then trigger, from the staff's opinion, the requirement to construct the walking trail along the Boring Road frontage. As you may know, there's currently a walking trail that kind of drops down right there. That was put in as part of the Country Way subdivision a few years ago. So, you know, the idea would be when Lot 2 further subdivides that there would be a covenant in place that would bind the owners of Lots 1 and 2 to construct that walking trail extension on down that frontage. And so that's kind of some of the issues that this particular subdivision has. It's got, it's a very important piece of property that has a lot of elements of the comprehensive plan and connectivity that, at some future date will be very important discussion points. But the staff was recommending approval of the plat subject to items A through I. And then at this time, based on the minor nature of the subdivision, we would support the two variance requests. Again, if Lot 2 were further subdivided, even if it's subdivided into 2 lots, we would recommend that that would trigger the walking trail completion along Boring Road and possibly other measures related to connectivity.
You all gone over these subject twos, and are you in agreement with those?
We aren't the applicant.
Okay. Yeah.
Richard Lynch, Lynch Surveys, 5732 Oak Road, Knoxville, Tennessee. Yes, it's my understanding that the owner, Mr. Boring, is in agreement with this. And obviously, as the surveyor, we would be pleased to make all the other corrections. Thank you.
Do you have questions or comments?
I have a comment.
Can
I'm
you
Brittany
tell us
Moore. Yes, Brittany Moore. I live at 221 Boring Lane. This is my dad, Sam Gwynn. He lives at 330 Chowning Drive. Our property completely lines up adjacent to Lot 2 on the east side. We have currently 2 tracts of land beside where my 1-acre home is, where Mark circled. There's 25.16 acres in the back and 24.16 acres in the front part. The back part of the property we have previously discussed with no current plans of future development. As Mark stated, this property has been in our family way longer than I've been around. And when Country Manor and the surrounding neighborhoods, the property was sold for development, the agreement was that if that property was ever developed, that there would be a connection, as Mark mentioned, from Dixie View into our property right after where Dixie View ends, pretty much. So we would just like that. I mean, it was kind of a family agreement before. We would just like that as lands passed on with a new owner, that's considered to match what's in the land use plan, which we're very aware of. So that's it.
Okay, I just need clarity on what, there's a lot of different, where are we putting in
Well,
trails?
like I talked with Mr. Boring about yesterday, there's a lot of this is kind of hypothetical at this point because we don't know what's going to happen with Lot 2.
Yeah. But what is Ms. Moore asking for? Is she asking for what we are proposing here, or?
Perhaps a plat note that would mention upon further subdivision of Lot 2 that there would be a connection into their property would be my understanding of what she's asking.
Yes, that's correct.
Basically,
That's
mirror
really
image the walking trail note that we've already discussed.
Yeah, it would be triggered on, and Lot 2 may never be subdivided in our lifetimes. I mean, it may be like that for a long time, and that's fine. But if you do want a plat note added that would, reference a connection to the property to the east, that's something that certainly can be considered. I'm not sure if the applicant has any comments on that, but it does make sense, and certainly the staff would support a connection to the east were Lot 2 ever further subdivided, because it makes good sense, and it does follow our current comprehensive land use plan.
Mr. Haynes, do you know what are we being clear? Because this would put some responsibility, not on you today, but it would put some responsibility on you potentially in the future if you sold your property and re-subdivided your property.
Yes, I'm David R. Haynes, 8614 Ashbourne Way, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37923. I'm the potential purchaser of Lot 2, and have been working with Mr. Boring for some time and working with Mark and his staff, getting approval for the rezoning from R2 to R1, so Mr. Boring can keep the original barn that was built, I think, in the 1800s. The other part that we've had to agree to is to remove the back section of the barn. We have got a demolition permit that's already in process to make sure that we meet the 35-foot setback in the area that Mark has just identified. We're fine with that. Also, the walkway connecting from the other subdivision that Mark mentioned, if I purchase the property and elect to further subdivide it, my intention is to put my personal residence there. So the easement from Mr. Boring into the driveway of where my home would be located, I'm fine with that. The agreement is that if I ever develop it, we would have to do that walkway connecting the connectivity. I'm perfectly fine with that. What I have a problem with here, and I don't know what the authority of this board or anyone else, if I purchase the property, how can it to be bound legally to require that easement to go into the property to the east? It may be something I would consider if I develop it, but I don't know that this board or anyone else has the authority to require me to do that. If it's developed, or if the owners of that property later develop it, the staff can certainly recommend that that be a consideration because of the connectivity. But I'm not sure that, and Mark or anyone else can correct me, if that can be legally required at this point. Since there is a lot of unknowns in the future, don't know if I will develop it. If that property becomes developed before I do, and it seems a little strange to me that I would have to grant an easement when there's nothing legally documented today that requires that. So that's my concern.
You wouldn't have to do an easement there. I think it was more just what I discussed earlier. If anything were added to the plat, it would be the plat note. But again, that's really up to you all. I mean, certainly, if you did subdivide the property, obviously, as you know, we've been very upfront with you. We would recommend a connection to the east because it makes sense. And if everybody's in agreement to add some reference on the plat to that effect, then that's certainly fine. But it wouldn't be establishing an easement at this time. It would just be a plat note.
But would it be legally binding, and where is it going to be required? Because that's very important to me,
and that's and
it could diminish the value of the property.
That's part of the hypothetical nature of that particular issue, is that we don't know how Lot 2 may be redivided. I think if it were, obviously the plat would come before the Planning Commission, and I would recommend the connections provided for in the land use plan, and that would be considered at that time based on the request before you.
Mr. Haynes, one thing that is important to note is if Sam's family develops his site, it doesn't automatically generate you having to grant any easement across. It's only triggered upon if you develop your site.
Understood.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, I'm somewhat at a loss at because I'm not seeing what's to the east and what's to the north is all developed. North of that property is already developed.
Yes, sir.
But I don't know what it looks like to the east.
50 vacant acres.
Yeah,
I have a map if you want to see what it looks like.
Probably you'd have, a cul-de-sac coming in.
The green line shows where our property meets the property that's been rezoned. Correct. So everything in orange is the area that we would develop if we aren't planning on it. Hopefully never mind that time. But the front part is not in the plan to develop that one. But
I mean, Dixie View was clearly stubbed out there for the further development of what is shown as Lot 2. I mean, that's pretty obvious.
Well, Mark, if a plat note is added for this connectivity, does it have to state exactly where?
No, it shouldn't, because we don't know anything about that.
Is that
It would have
palatable
to
to you,
be-
David? Basically, just a plat note that say at some point when it is further subdivided, access yet to be determined would be granted from Dixie View over to the property to the east.
No, sir. Because it would seem to me that if I come back and decide to develop that at some later point, I have to come before this body and others to get approval.
Correct.
And it would seem to me the appropriate time to add that note is when that action is taken, okay? Because we're dealing with hypotheticals that may or may not happen, but we all know I would have to come back before this body for approval, so wouldn't that be the time to require it?
I would say yes. However, we do have a land use plan that does spell out some vehicular connectivity in that particular spot.
Right? And I would have to comply with whatever is legally required, and I would. But to put a note without specifics when we don't know, it would be the same question that perhaps I would have of the Gwens. Well, okay, what's going to be developed there? They don't know. Is it going to be multifamily? Am I going to have a lot of cars coming through there? You know, are there 50 homes? Are there 5? So it would seem to me to agree to that, not even knowing how it would be something I'm not comfortable with.
I'd like to say, what are the other access points to the Moore property now? Do they not have other access points?
Well, they do. They have one to Chowning and potentially something else in Village Green. I can't remember. But obviously, the more access points that you can have, the better. That promotes our land use plan, the connectivity that's encouraged in that. So we would certainly, as staff, would certainly strongly recommend that if Lot 2 were further subdivided, that they would tie into the property to the east, because it's in our plan and it's good planning to do that.
But they do have access now. They do have legal access to public roads now.
Yes, they would. But there is a lot of uncertainty about what would happen, and Mr. Haynes makes a good point. You know, how it gets developed and it may not get developed for 20 years. It is a little bit tricky to.
Well, most importantly, it's all dictated by if Mr. Haynes develops, not by if Mr. Gwynn develops.
That's correct.
Sam, did you guys have some other comments?
Just to make it clear, we're not asking for an easement for us to be able to have access unless he were to choose to develop it. Just to make that clear, I'm not requesting an easement for us unless it's developed. Second off, where the property is, it's completely surrounded by single-family residential housing. It's currently zoned agriculture, but on the land use plan, it's single-family residential zone. So there's no option based on the land use plan, because it's locked by single-family residential, for us to put in multifamily homes. We wouldn't want that anyway. It's not what we've discussed. And the one access point that we do have is from Chowning Drive, which currently would come in there through some residential area, but there is no other access point from to the back property. It's completely surrounded by Country Manor, Village Green on 3 sides of it.
I'm Sam Gwynn, 330 Chowning Drive. In the 70s, when Country Manor was developed, in order for the accessibility before the city of Farragut or anything else, before Knox County Building Commission, and they said that conductivity to the 2 parts would be good, because that was one farm at one time. Village Green was built, and the developers of Village Green had access and had dibs on the other properties that went through there, and the whole idea was all those properties to be connected. So when Country Manor was put in, Dixie View, which goes up the hill, was put in, and there was a map that was submitted, two Knox County commissioners, and that was approved, and it was a development of Country Manor. If they wanted to do on up, they didn't have to get it approved farther on, and there was an access road put in there. All we're asking for, we're not asking for an easement. I just don't know, we don't know, my lifetime, my daughter's lifetime, who might buy the Haynes property. He might sell it, and we just would like for a note to be put in there. We're not asking for an easement, we're just asking for a note that conductivity be available if he sells that property. Not if we develop ours, but if he sells that. I mean, that's protection for us, that we just would like to get it put back in there and keep it in place like it is right now.
Again, my final comment would be this body, I have to come before this body and others to get approval to do that. And to me, that's the appropriate time to address it. You know, to put and bind myself and a future owner to what may or may not occur does not feel like that's prudent nor reasonable. Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Are we ready for a motion?
You would need to address the three separate issues, the same thing. The pedestrian facility, the open space, and the plat itself.
Well, I'll try to get the ball rolling here. I seem to be doing that pretty well tonight. So, I'm going to start with the first variance, and I'm going to make a motion to approve the variance request to not construct pedestrian facilities at this time due to the minor nature of the subdivision.
I'll second. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose?
Ed, were you opposing?
No, because it's conditioned that it'll happen someday.
Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I will then make a motion to approve the variance to not provide the 10% open space at this time due to the minor nature of the subdivision.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose?
Now, the last item gets a little tricky in the sense that I understand where both parties are. You know, it's kind of like both sides of the coin, and they're both correct. But my personal thought would be that we not put the plat note on there. I think there's going to be an opportunity in the future if something would happen where that piece of property would be sold for us to, as the town, to ensure that the proper controls and accesses are put in place at that time. So with that said, I'm going to make a motion to approve the plat with the subject twos that are currently listed.
Second.
Second. I think that, I agree with Ron, the fact that it'll come back to us if it gets subdivided or sold. So I think that we'll have the protection I think the Gwynns need that time to look at it, the total merits. And I think we can address both parties' concerns. So
Also, you have to provide connectivity to that land.
Right.
Legal.
Yeah.
We can't hear. We could not hear what's being recommended. I'm sorry. That could be restated.
Okay, yeah, not a problem. I apologize for that. What I had stated is that I'm going the direction that you had requested, so we are not going to put a plat note in there. I've made a motion that we approve with the subject twos that are currently listed in the agenda that was passed out.
A second.
And there was a second made.
All those in favor? Aye. Oppose? Discussion and public hearing on a site plan for telecommunication towers, a portion of parcel 37.03, tax map 153, located off Concord Road, adjoining Clarity Point and First Utilities District, Zone C-1, and telecommunication towers overlay. 5.24 acres, branch towers applicant.
Okay. Well, as you all know, back in August, there was a rezoning that was approved after a couple of workshop sessions with the Planning Commission. to have a tower overlay and a base zone of C1 on this particular property off of Concord Road. It's actually over 600 feet from Concord Road. It's kind of a flag lot you can see there on the screen. So now they're before you with the site plan request. There were some stipulations associated with the rezoning by both the Planning Commission and the board that dealt with the height of the tower, that only one tower be permitted on this property, and that the monopine stealth application, basically a concealment application, be applied to this tower. And at the Board of Mayor and Alderman level, they went a little further and stipulated that it be dense, as tree-shaped as possible, rather than a bottle brush kind of look, that it actually is shaped more like a tree, and that the lower part of the monopine application would extend to basically where the top of the existing tree canopy is on the site. Keep in mind that this site hasn't been developed, and you know, a lot of the trees on that property could at some future date be removed as part of development, so it could be much more, you know, visible. I'll put the monopine. That's what was proposed in the site plan documents. As I understand it, and Mary can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's about 5 feet wide at the very top, and then it is roughly 18 feet wide at the bottom, 9 feet on each side of the tower. It's 160 feet rather than 170. That was lowered from when it came before you for the rezoning. But obviously, given the height, 160 feet, basically 100 feet protruding above the existing tree canopy out there, to widen by 13 feet, it's still going to be, you know, relatively bottle brush shaped. I mean, it's pretty kind of narrow. But that's my understanding of the width of it. The staff's comments related to this item are at your places. There really weren't many remaining subject tos, but I do think that everybody needs to take a look at the stealth application that's proposed to make sure that you all feel that it's consistent, or if it's not consistent with the rezoning conditions, then I think the applicant would need some guidance on that.
Questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
Based on the letter they submitted, I think that approach is more than adequate.
Yeah. I'm Mary Miller, 6223 Highland Place Way, Suite 101, Knoxville, and I'm here on behalf of Branch Towers. One thing I wanted to note, the reason we did have to lower it to 160 is the ordinance says that it has to be set back based on the farthest protrusion from the tower, and because we did move to a stealth application, the limbs are 9 feet out, so we had to measure it from the distance of the limbs. It'll be 5 feet on each side at the top, and then it'll graduate out to 9 feet on each side. So it'll probably be a little wider at both places because they're gonna be coming out from the tower itself. So there'll be a little density there added to it. I think the two issues that we had were, one was trying to get a little more comfortable with the page that shows the tower. We sent Mark a page this afternoon. I don't know, did you have a chance to look at it?
No,
okay.
No, I had too many.
We've got a copy here that these are from the actual tower designs from the tower manufacturer that show, and I appreciate y'all's patience with me. My daughter had to work, and we had a little emergency come up this afternoon, so I have a new partner.
Actually, this design is a lot more natural looking.
Yeah.
I applaud you guys. This is exactly what we asked you to do at the rezoning phase. I wish that we could get this incorporated in the other towers in town at some point. So this is great.
And what we talked to Mark about and reached conclusion was that we would do limbs down to 60 feet, and that's below the tree line right now. I think the so what we would propose to do is remove page 15 and substitute this page in place, or supplement it with this page, because this is actually from the people who build the tower.
That addresses item E on the
Yeah.
comment. Okay.
And then the other issue is the landscaping, the shrubs. Mark had suggested red cedars. We have Curtis Stewart here, who is our landscape engineer for this. I think I'd like him to address it because he probably is a little bit more qualified to address it with y'all than I am.
Hi, Curtis Stewart, landscape architect, Mary, with Cooper Stewart Landscape Architecture, 7238 Ashburton Drive, Knoxville. What was in the original package, I failed to put any screening around the fence as called for by the town's documents. We met and actually exceeded the canopy tree requirements. And then in discussions with Mark, the town came back and suggested eastern red cedar. One of the issues with that is this site is relatively flat where the development will be, so there's very little grading, which means there'll be very little removal of existing trees. And when the canopy trees are going back in, the oaks and the tulip poplars that we proposed, when they mature, they will create a completely shaded area around this compound. Any evergreens, especially that are planted around the fence, will be completely shaded out and they will die. So the screening effect in the future will be null and void. I left, hang on. What we would like to do, if we're going to screen, is take some of the shrubs from the town of Farragut's recommended large shrub list, which would include bottlebrush, buckeye, sweet shrub, and leatherleaf viburnum. And instead of taking a single species in a stockade approach, just lined around there, allowing us to soften that a little bit. Two of the species, the buckeye and the sweet shrub, are deciduous, so they won't be evergreen, which will change the screening a little bit. But in the overall effect with the environment that this particular tower is in, it will be a more softened, natural approach to the standard, just ringing this thing with 19, in this case, eastern red cedars or any other type of tall evergreen shrub. So
and that would be perfectly acceptable. Yeah, and eastern red cedar was just mentioned is because it's very slow growing and it's very hardy. They can grow almost anywhere. But certainly what he suggests is very acceptable. In fact, I would rather it look more naturally spaced. Okay. But there is the requirement for cell towers that you have to have the 4.5 foot tall shrubs around the idea was most of these have some type of maybe chain link fencing around the lease area, and that just to soften basically that. Obviously it would do nothing toward the tower, but just to soften the chain link fence area around the lease space. So I think what he suggests would be fine, and we would just need an amendment on the landscape plan. And on this stealth application, I would just need to be clear about this. Looks on the paper, it looks better than the one on the screen to me, but I would need to make sure that it, what the dimensions exactly are going to be of this. I don't know if it's still 18 feet wide or if it's wider. It's hard for me to tell on that. There's a lot of dimensions there, but maybe I'm missing it. Because actually what you're proposing with the handout looks wider than...
under where it says design loading, where it says 160 to 60, that's where it says 5 foot to 9 foot in length.
Each side, so double that plus the thickness of the pole.
Right.
So it's still basically 18 feet wide at the base.
Are you satisfied?
Well, I do like the handout better than what's on the screen. I do think that looks more tree-like to me.
And if you want to make a condition, subject to that says that it's 5 feet on each side at the top and it graduates down to 9 feet on each side, we're fine with that, from 160 to 660.
Well, I mean, it's whatever you all are comfortable with. I think it just needs to be as tree-like looking as possible.
I bet it'll be the best looking cell tower in all of East Tennessee.
Yeah.
One of the tallest
sure hope you're right.
trees.
One of the tallest trees in East Tennessee.
So I think this is what I just want to try to do a summary as to where I think we're at, if I understand correctly. We're going to substitute this page 15 for the one that's in the packet. With that, Mark, you're comfortable that we can delete the subject to E, is that correct?
Well, probably. I haven't had a chance to, unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to look at this. I just had too many things going on this afternoon that were unexpected. So I would need to obviously review this page. This is the first I've seen it.
Well, there actually wouldn't be a problem with leaving the current E as is, because I believe anyways, substituting the current one, I think we'll take care of the subject
Take care of that. That's probably right.
So we can just leave it as is when I.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's fine.
Yeah.
There are other aspects on the current page 15.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's kind of like you can't just do a one-for-one substitution.
Well, as Mark pointed out to me, and is one of the things, because they do these plans in such detail, it probably has much more detail than we actually need for this level. But that's fine, I think, to leave it, because you're right, one of the things it shows, for example, the azimuths of the antenna and stuff, so I think that's fine.
And with the dimensions that were suggested, since that's on the replacement 15, that solves that problem as well. Or am I misunderstanding something? So we kind of cover the bases without having to change anything, right?
I still need the subject to just for housekeeping in there.
Yeah, absolutely, yes, yeah.
Yep.
And I think, and the applicant concurs.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
All right, then I'm going to make a motion to
Well,
approve with the subject to.
One question first about the lighting. Have you worked out the lighting here?
There's not lighting.
No
because
side lighting.
This is just a cabinet, so there's no lighting.
Okay.
And don't
Yep.
forget the landscaping that we're going to change.
Yeah,
that.
and that's fine. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm not,
Is that addressed?
there's really nothing we have to change, though, is there? I mean, the subject to pretty much takes care of that as well.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
right, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll leave my motion as is.
Okay.
I'll second Ron's motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you very
And
much.
your partner did really good.
Thank you.
Discussion and public hearing on the adoption of a vested property rights ordinance and amendment to the text of the Farragut subdivision regulations to address new legislation regarding vested property rights as established in the TCA 13-4-31, or 310.
As you may recall, last month we recommended approval of an ordinance that created vested property rights and development standards ordinance in the municipal code. We also approved an amendment to the zoning ordinance that would make the zoning ordinance consistent with that ordinance, with the ordinance you all approved, dealing with the vested property rights. At that time, and that's gone through the Board of Mayor and Alderman, has been formally approved at 2 readings. It was mentioned last month that we wouldn't be considering the subdivision regulations amendment because that does not have to be an ordinance form, so it doesn't have to go to the Board of Mayor and Alderman. And if we had acted on it last month, it would have been referencing something that had not been approved yet. So at your places is a copy of Resolution PC-15-16. I would note that I made a minor adjustment to the wording from what was in your packet, but it is consistent with my discussions with Tom Hale, the town attorney, And that's basically just to clarify that the development standards in existence at the time of and applicable to the specific concept plan approved, or preliminary plat approved, or final plat approved. So that was language that we wanted in there, and that's also consistent with the language that was in the zoning ordinance amendment. So it's minor, but it does clean that language up a little bit and make it more clear. So with that amendment to this resolution, the staff would recommend approval.
Do you have any questions or comments?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion on a request to amend the 2012 Comprehensive Land Use Plan for property located at 12639 Kingston Pike, 30.13 acres, from civic institutional to commercial. Paul R. Swan, applicant. And this is for discussion purposes only.
As you may remember, back in March and April at the Planning Commission meeting, we had an applicant that had requested a future land use map amendment on this property and a rezoning request. And in April, this actually on the screen is the old land use map for this property. In April, actually, the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval to change the area that's shown in brown, which was medium density residential, to commercial, but the area in yellow, which is low density residential, is now civic institutional. As you may remember, that applicant had actually initially requested to change the whole parcel to commercial, similar to what's before you tonight. But the staff and the commission felt that that was not consistent with the land use plan, and it needed to provide a better transition to the property along Union Road, and which is residential north of Union Road. So that area was changed to civic institutional. I think the applicant at that time was interested in potentially an assisted living facility, which might have fit in well with that land use designation. So the request basically before you in terms of the future land use map in this case is to change the area that's shown in yellow, which is actually now civic institutional, to commercial. If you look at the future land use map in the surrounding area, there aren't any commercial properties basically until you get toward Watt Road, other than the front portion of this property that was changed back in April. There is zoning districts that do go back to Union Road to the west of this property, but those were established many years ago, and I don't know the history of that. Were someone to come in before the staff today with a request like that, like the second item, I would not support that, because I think that's too far back to go with commercial, and it doesn't provide the proper transition. But that's just to give you some context. So actually, the brown area
Madam Chairman, while Mark's working on that, can I make a quick statement? I am the Swan family's real estate broker as well as a potential developer on this site, and I will not be voting on any items as it relates to this property. And matter of fact, I'd actually, if it's all right with you, I'd like to go sit in the audience. Okay.
But the area in the brown, and again, this is the previous future land use plan. We haven't made the changes to the map yet because there's some others, other things that we're looking at amending. But that area that's highlighted is actually red now, so it's commercial. The yellow, like I mentioned earlier, is civic institutional, which is the light blue color that's to the west of this property. There's some churches out there that are the civic institutional land use designation, and you can see that the other designation is basically residential, on the future land use map, and you don't get into commercial until much further west, actually past Hobbs Road on the north side of Kingston Pike. So the staff would not support this request to change the land use, future land use map.
Statement. Again, my name is Paul Swan. I'm actually one of the members, or my dad and my uncle actually own that piece of property, so I represent the family. Been working with Noah for about 2 years on this piece of property, and I was here back in April with an opportunity. The particular piece of property, I know we did have it amended, has been under the green belt under family past being a farm. Back in 1925 was actually when it was my grandfather's farm and was a dairy farm at that point. Matter of fact, the dairy is still out there, and we might say the barn's still standing, but it is there. So our request tonight is to request for all C1 zoning on the entire parcel. When I look, I thought we had presented a map that actually showed our
Yeah, I'll pull that up here.
Okay, because I think that's important to demonstrate what we're trying to show. But the requesting the C1 zoning next to the piece beside us is consistent with that zoning on that piece of property being commercial all the way back. Yeah, and as noted on this particular drawing right here, on the yellow part that is actually marked off there, that's actually 6 acres of open space park, which would accommodate, from my understanding, a lot of the planning with the community here in Farragut. And with our land plan use, essentially, we're looking, Mark, you made the comment of a grocery store prior to on our previous proposal. We're looking at a little bit larger grocery store on this one. But I think what the grocery store client is requesting from us is that we have synergy with other retail space on the property, and that would adjust the grocery store back on the property. And that's really why we're requesting the C1. So that's really my comments. Take any questions.
Well, and there's two separate requests. I just put this up that actually is related to the rezoning, but the first one is related to the land use plan because, you know, to consider the rezoning, it would need to be consistent with the future land use map. So if we go back to that, this is the first request. It deals with basically turning the yellow to red on that particular parcel.
Questions or comments?
You know, I think this is just a great piece of property. I think it has tremendous potential, and you know, that area has become a de facto gateway in our community. But I personally really struggle. I understand what you're trying to do. I just really struggle going that far on that piece of property. I like where we're at today after our previous discussion, you know, just a few months ago. Where I'm at today, I just can't, I can't see myself changing where we're at today. I just struggle with that due to all the residential on the other side of Union Road. I just don't think it's appropriate. So. You'd have a ways to go to convince me yet.
I would agree with Commissioner Honkin's assessment. I think the only thing I would be in agreement with changing that back area to either leaving it civic institutional or I could envision something like townhomes, something a little denser as far as housing, but having that, you know, in our land use plan, we address that, needing that transition and protecting the existing neighborhood. And I believe going commercial all the way back does not do that. And I understand that those properties to the west are zoned commercial, but I think that came in well before our town was developed. I think we kind of inherited that. It certainly doesn't show in our land use plan, and when you drive down there, those are all, that's very residential there along Union Road. And of course, it is residential across the street. I just think that it's just going a step too far to bring that commercial all the way back.
I have a comment. Jamie Dunn. I live at 821 Brochart Boulevard in Fox Run. I'm really excited about seeing something like this. I feel like having an area like that, convenient, walking distance to a grocery store and maybe a nice restaurant would be nice. I think it would also improve the real estate value of our houses. I just wanted to come and state that. I'm kind of excited about seeing something like this.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I just want to be clear that what we have is already in the land use plan.
What we're seeing on the screen is in the land use plan, but we've modified it through the
Right.
April
The
meeting.
brown
So the
area
brown
is,
red.
yeah, the brown area is red, and the yellow area is blue, similar to what's to the west of it, Civic Institutional. Yeah, and we talked a lot about that yellow area.
Right.
Because the original applicant requested the same thing, if you remember. They wanted to go commercial all the way back, and that was a big topic of discussion.
My name's Dennis Dean. I live at 12715 Union Road. I live directly across from the piece of property. And if you look at it, I guess I've got about 8 acres across from it, with about 1.5 acres that belongs to the Ivies. The big concern I have, personally, I would rather see a large grocery store rather than I would a nursing home assisted living facility. If you have a nursing home assisted living facility, you're subject to have ambulances in and out all night long. You're having noises come up from that. Whereas if you have a grocery store, as long as it's not a 24-hour grocery store, and even if it is a 24-hour grocery store, it's across the road, you're not going to have the loud siren noises coming through during the night. A major concern I have, though, and if you do that, is in the timing of the development. I would like to see no access off of Union Road into it, in particular until Union Road is enhanced, which I know it's in the planning stages, and I think it's in budget for 2018. But at this point in time, that part of Union Road is very dangerous with culverts, narrow road. Oh, and as far as the commercial side, I would just soon see the grocery store there as I had the nursing home, assisted living facilities.
Noah Myers, 503 Concord Road, Farragut, Tennessee. Mark, would you mind locating on there where Mr. Dean's property is? He is the one that is closest to that yellow area that we're proposing to be red.
I might be wrong, but I think it's this.
That's exactly it.
Is that it? Is that not
Oh,
it?
no, that's right. He's right. It's actually the larger one to the right.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
The other parcel that is next to Mr. Dean is part of the Ivy Farm. Of course, Mr. Ivy's been in here quite a few times over the years about trying to develop that farm into a new subdivision. One of the things that dictates this particular change is the other applicant that brought this before the commission back this spring had a much smaller footprint grocery store. 40,000 square foot footprint grocery store. The particular grocery store, which is really the largest grocery store chain that's not represented in the town of Farragut, would very much like to be here, and they understand the demographics of West Farragut and very much would like to be in that location with a 62,000 square foot store. By the time you accommodate a 62,000 square foot store, which is, to put it in perspective, that is smaller than Kroger but about the same size as Ingles. It's not a grocery store that has the clothes and furnishings and things like that, but it is a grocery store that we've all heard of, that we very much be proud to be in the town of Farragut. The biggest challenge that they have in site selection is that particular format of a store, there is not another suitable location that is on Kingston Pike in West Farragut that meets all the litmus tests that the town of Farragut requires for commercial properties. So being consistent with the zoning that is next door, quite frankly, I know we're looking at the land use plan and the zoning, and they really go hand in hand. The zoning does extend all the way to Union Road. If we did a residential zone back there, there's a residential zones that we could do, but it offers no protection for Mr. Dean, no buffers. What we're offering here is actually a buffer that is required in the C1 zoning district that is not required in other residential zoning districts. Now, if we did an assisted living, which I have no clients or prospects for a particular assisted living, and if I had the assisted living, it would kill the grocery store because the grocery store can't make this project work without this much property being commercial for them. And it is not only important for them to have this particular large benchmark store, which is their new prototype store, but it's important for them to have the synergy of other retailers, which I think a lot of folks that are within walking distance would like to be able to walk over from Fox Run or Saddle Ridge or Camden Grove and be able to go to a restaurant or ride their bike. So I really think we're missing the forest for the trees here. I do understand the transition. I think the biggest transition that we're doing is 6 acres of dedicated open space that is basically between the entrance of Fox Run and to the west side of our creek. And then that area is space that if the town of Farragut, and the town of Farragut has inquired in the past about maybe putting a walking trail connection through there, that would be an appropriate spot for a walking trail. But I think that is the transition area. And I think when you have the homeowner right across the street that says, gosh, I'd rather have a grocery store than have an assisted living or a nursing home, I think that should speak volumes to what we're discussing about what's best for the community. I think Mr. Swan also has a letter that he'd like to read into the record from another homeowner that actually lives right at the entrance of Fox Run.
Yes, and actually we got copies here if you want. Can you pass this? So I'd like to read this into the record. This is I'll just read the letter. As a longtime Farragut resident and homeowner of more than 25 years at the entrance of Fox Run subdivision, I am writing to express my support of rezoning to commercially the property generally referred to as the Swan property located nearby on Kingston Pike. It is my understanding that preliminary plans include a grocery store to be built there. I would much rather see a grocery store and neighborhood retail as compared to other mixed-use commercial enterprises. The convenience of a grocery store and possibly a few additional businesses makes more sense to me. The Renaissance development is located in that area as well as a nearby strip containing Anytime Fitness and other retail businesses. I believe that by developing the Swan property in this way, it will also help bring additional customers to these existing businesses. This, in turn, will bring additional sales tax dollars to Farragut. The addition of a grocery store adds not only the advantage of convenience, but also the advantage of competition. Also, a nice sit-down restaurant nearby and within walking distance would be great. This will also likely bring shoppers from nearby Loudoun County, as it will be more convenient for them to shop here instead of driving into Lenoir City. Again, providing additional sales tax revenue or dollars to our town, and is signed by Michael Scott Ward, who couldn't be here tonight. But I know there was a lot of discussion about that neighborhood back in April, so I think that's a very powerful letter.
I guess the real issue on that is going way back to April, is that the transition from the commercial area to the residential area, not being rather abrupt. But if in fact it's on the south side of the Union Road, so it's the other side of the road, it's a transition there anyway. And I guess the some mechanism of trying to figure out what to do about the transition. But I think that if that would change the whole thing to commercial and allow to development of a grocery store with the ancillary things like in the Kroger shopping center and so forth, would probably be much more desirable than trying to find some institutional thing to work.
I completely agree with you, Commissioner Whiting.
We'll have to take a break at 9, so just that.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
I agree with Louise that this area is good for apartments or something like that.
Yeah, to me, something like back here would be a nice supplement to a commercial project because you'd have people living nearby. It's kind of what we talked about Monday, where you have this feathering, this transition of, different types of forms where you don't have a buffer that separates one from the other because you have an abrupt change of uses, and therefore you have a necessity to have a buffer strip, but a buffer strip doesn't build a greater sense of community. And that's where a true transition could aid in that. And that property, the floodplain property, is undevelopable anyway. The floodway, in fact, is very wide through there. So that's going to be open space no matter what happens.
Oh, and I can appreciate the comments about people wanting to walk over there. But when I think of a sense of community of people wanting to walk to something, I think of something more like Renaissance, which is one of our premier projects. I don't look at it as being somebody wanting to walk to a 60,000 square foot grocery store. We need grocery stores. I have nothing against grocery stores. And, I have no doubt this project would be outstanding. But that just, the walkability piece just doesn't register with me. And I know where Michael lives because he lives right next door to me. Michael's house backs up against Everett Road. So Michael, even where he sits today, he can't see this piece of property. So, and Michael's a good guy. I consider him a friend. But I really struggle with, I could see this piece of property, especially on the front, the part that that would now be red on here, is really being a neat little neighborhood concept. I just think that changing that whole piece of property to that commercial would, I think it would, this may sound kind of dumb, but I think it would take some of the elegance off of what could really be something quite special.
I would add one comment, I guess, that I tend to make in most instances like this it's no dispersion on, the honor of the folks before us here, Mr. Swan and certainly Noah. But we're really looking at the zoning, not the fact that it could be a grocery store or what have you. And that's my biggest concern. I mean, we were here looking with a plan before in April, and we vetted the discussion for multiple aspects of this, whether it be the transition zoning or the access, the road improvements to Union, and what have you. And the plan changed since April, and plans change. And so I have to look at this purely with some blinders on relative to not what some vision that might be on that as opposed to what the zoning change is being made on its own merits. And I'm just not really moved yet to move from what we did back in April.
We will need to take a break, though. Right.
I'd like to make one statement to that, because when we were here in April, a lot of the conversation became about Union Road, not necessarily about the piece of property. And is the way I saw it that night, because there was a lot of discussion on the access, and I don't think we're asking for the access on that road tonight.
Let's take a break.
I need to change tape, so we'll.
Intermission?
See this man here in the front room. Sorry, not the front row, but
Now, do they have to take those to the, they don't have to take those to the Board of Zoning Appeals?
Go on if you're going, because we need to get back.
Yeah, they don't have to.
Back up that way.
Like the self-created variance problem. It's a self-created problem. We're not fixing that for you.
I could have, but they were dump trucks and they had.
The sad thing is, I know how much money.
I don't really have a problem. Property for a while.
That's Mark.
Trying to get down to where Smith Road comes in.
Access problem, and I don't think anything can be done until that's fixed.
We're ready to convene the meeting again. The tape is on.
Mark, could I ask you to go back to that zoning map?
Oh, yeah. Let's see.
The zoning map is what reflects the zoning that is in place today. And I think it better illustrates what's going on, especially since this map Mark hadn't had a chance to update it.
Well,
Maybe not.
maybe not. We may have another issue. This thing hates me, by the way.
You actually have them. Well, just in case Mark's PowerPoint presentation didn't work, I happen to also bring copies of the zoning map for everybody.
Doesn't trust your abilities.
The technology, that's the new laptop too, isn't it?
My abilities either.
We're having troubles Monday night.
Oh, there it went. Okay, I don't know. Oh, there we go, Noah. I got you. Covered. You better hurry while it's on the.
But I think what you would all see is what we're asking for is very consistent with, even though necessarily the use today may not have commercial, but the zoning is already there today that goes all the way to Union Road. We've got adjacent property owners, actually in the church, nobody's from the church is here tonight. The church is very aware of it. They appear to be very supportive of it. And so we have a lot of excitement for this particular development. I disagree with Ron Honkin. I think it'll be a very walkable development. I think that you can look at any of the projects that I've been involved with. We take things to the next level. The Farragut sets the bar here, and we raise the bar a little bit higher. This is a development, even though it's a 62,000 square foot store with other retail, with some restaurants. I think that you're going to see that there's a real opportunity for the community that Ron Honkin was talking about. This does have the feel of a community. This would also, assuming the traffic warrants support it, this would also have a signalized intersection at Way Station Trail, which would have crosswalks. So if folks from Fox Run wanted to be able to get over, have a direct access to come over to Renaissance and hang out at the Red, White, and Blues Festival or go to Oktoberfest, they're going to have access via that crosswalk to be able to come. And, of course, the sidewalks are already built at Renaissance. Part of the sidewalks are already built along the Swan property with the construction of the new Everett Road Bridge. There would be additional pedestrian facilities that would be included as part of this project that would come through at the site plan phase. But I really think we need to stand back and look at the transition that's there with the OSP, listen to what adjacent property owners are saying to you, and look at the project and look at what the benefits it'll bring to the town of Farragut as far as what the community wants, as well as sales tax dollars that this particular grocery store does not fit on any other site in Farragut. Well, with the exception of Mayor Ford's site, which, quite frankly, this grocery store does not want to be in the downtown of Farragut. They actually want to be in West Farragut. They do want to be able to service all the West Farragut customers as well as Loudoun County customers. And there is not another site that is large enough that accommodates this grocery. This is the one site that accommodates it. There was a grocery store about 10 years ago that was presented at Watt Road, significantly smaller grocery store. That site has already been looked at. That site does not work for this grocery store. And it is also important that this grocery store wants the synergy of the other retail. It is important for them to have folks that come in and visit other retailers as well as visit the grocery store. I think there are a lot of things that we could do to help address some of your concerns, whether it is if it's additional buffer, if it's additional open space. There's a lot of things that we worked on when we did Renaissance, that we actually increased the size of the buffer at Renaissance, that is the C1 backing right up to R2, and that doesn't even have a road in between it. This one has a road in between the residential and the proposed commercial zoning. And there's things that we did with that buffer that we went above and beyond the required C1 buffer and dedicated additional buffer, and those homeowners were very happy. If any of you remember that, we had homeowners here kind of like this that we had shared our project with, and they wanted our project to be there because they felt like that was the best fit for their neighborhood. As well as we have homeowners here tonight saying, hey, this is a great fit. I would rather have this. I don't want apartments. I don't want nursing homes. I don't want an assisted living right there.
I'm just going to make one last point. It pains me to, I understand the amount of money a grocery store brings to our community. And if there's any way to bring it to the front of that property and have a transition there, from Fox Run, we would be, and from the surrounding neighbors, we would be looking at the back of a big box building without any other transition in there to, we're just not protecting the neighborhoods by pushing that commercial all the way back. This area, I know that's commercial, it's supposed to be commercial all the way back. These are residences, these are houses and churches. It's just to bring it all the way back is not protecting those neighborhoods, and it's painful for me to say that I just can't. I'm just really struggling with this.
Well, how
I think
far
if
back?
you extended it back too, we'd really have to relook at the comprehensive plan for that whole area.
Yeah.
Because there would be a significant deviation from the future land use map.
Well, you have a lot of fragmented parcels to the west of there that are identified as commercial, as well as identified as on the zoning map, but as well as identified on the comprehensive land use plan as churches, institutional, as and obviously residential. So yes, it is different than what's on that map. That map doesn't quite reflect what's there today, but it's close. The tan area is red, and the yellow area has been moved to the kind of the bluish gray color. But I think what you're hearing folks say is that we don't necessarily want the bluish gray color, and I can assure you that we've dealt with apartments enough in this town. We're not going to get anybody excited out at Fox Run or Saddle Ridge or Sedgefield or Camden Grove about an apartment complex. I think we've all seen what happens when apartments get proposed. I don't have anybody that has inquired about apartments. But what I have is I have some folks that have said, hey, I would rather see the retail there. If we need a larger buffer, a transition strip, I think that is completely negotiable, and I'm willing to look at that. But I think just to say, well, no, you can't have this because you're not having some component in there of which adjacent property owners are saying they don't want that component in there. But if you want some greater transition, I think those are some things that we'd be happy to look at.
No, I think you got one other aspect too. I mean, we've heard of small sample of residents, number one. Two, there's 2 large tracts that will be developed, the Ivy Farm, that area.
That's true.
There's going to be a lot more residents that might not have those same feelings too. It might impact how they feel about that property and how it develops too. So, I mean, we're looking at planning. We're not looking, and I will go back to say, I'm looking at the zoning, not the promise of a grocery store. even though I have no doubt that you're trying your best to bring that deal to fruition.
Sure.
But, so we'd point out, we had a very reputable developer talking to us about a grocery store in April. The ink's hardly dry on that, and the plan's changed.
The plan did change. His grocery store, which is a grocery store.
I point out that we got to focus on the zoning and the plan, the comprehensive land use plan, not get enamored with just a use.
Well, one of the things that we would be comfortable with is if one particular use under the C1 is more palatable than another use under the C1, we could hold the second reading from the Board of Mayor and Aldermen until there's further commitments that are made before any zoning would actually take place. Matter of fact, one of the homeowners asked me, well, if you had C1, couldn't you just build apartments on it? Well, technically you could build apartments on C1. We have no desire to build apartments on C1, and we'd make a commitment not to build apartments on C1.
You can't build apartments in C1 other than in the mixed-use town center. Yeah, it's just in the mixed-use. Maybe you should be able to. I mean, that's certainly recommended.
That's just in the MUTC?
Yeah, that's just in the MUTC.
But if there are other concerns, I had
not apartments.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what, Miss Betty?
I said apartments, but I meant condos.
Okay. Well, and I had a homeowner ask me, well, what about a liquor store? And I said, well, there's lots of things that we could deed restrict on the property. We've had conversations with the church, and the church had also concerns about our liquor store. They didn't want to be next to a liquor store. And so those are things that we could always say, hey, we're going to permanently restrict certain uses, and we'd be comfortable doing that.
Did we rezone?
Part of a zoning action.
Well, we actually have. We can do that. Tom Hale has opined that it is possible to put certain restrictions. We looked at an R6 development on Turkey Creek a year or two ago, and matter of fact, Tom Hale said, hey, if you guys want to restrict against apartments but allow nursing homes, you could do that.
Can't target to say it's going to be a grocery store.
Yeah, I agree with you. You probably would want to restrict more things than saying, hey, you can only be this. But if it's a laundry list of things that you don't like or the neighbors don't like, we could work through that list and see if all those things make sense, and we'd be happy to comply with it.
No, it is challenging because, as has been mentioned, we have to deal with the zoning versus the project, and everything that you've stated and what you've done in previous projects is accurate. You've built, I think you've built some of the most beautiful places in our community, quite frankly. And it makes it challenging, I guess. Perhaps having a picture painted would give me a different perspective. I'm not there yet. I'm not at hell no, but I'm certainly a long ways from a yes at this point. But it is, and there's times that we have to vote based on a certain amount of trust, quite frankly. But I think you've got some more work to do. You've raised some good points. What I don't want to have happen is I don't want to in any way, shape, or form spoil either, as I mentioned earlier, what is now the de facto gateway to our community, and I certainly don't want to spoil anything for the future residents. Because even though the one gentleman, and it's getting late, I'm getting to the point I can hardly read anything anymore. So I apologize, Mr. Dean, lives there now. If he would sell tomorrow and somebody moves in and said, well, I'm completely against it, I don't want that to drive my decision either. We have to look at what's best for the community as a whole and over the next several years. So I just think you have a little more work to do in painting this picture, because this piece of property, as I said, this may be a strong term, but I think it's really a jewel in our community. And if we do it well, it's going to be outstanding. If we don't do it well, it's going to be an eyesore for many years. And we don't want that to happen. So there are certain pieces of property that I think need a little more time and attention, and for me, I think this is one of them in our town.
I can assure you that I will never build an eyesore.
I have no doubt of that.
You probably
I have no doubt of that.
most know that how critical I am. Nevertheless, I do understand that once it's zoned, anything that is permissible in that zoning district. So we are open-minded to suggestions. The grocery store does take up a chunk of it, and the grocery store needs the synergy of other retailers. So we are open-minded to try to come up with a solution that addresses the transitional need that is spelled out in the land use plan, and hopefully would address residents that want to be able to walk. We're not addressing anything that has to do with access to Union Road. I'm sure pedestrian access to Union Road would probably make sense. And so I think having folks that could walk or ride their bikes, as a matter of fact, even if it is a big grocery store, I think folks would ride their bikes and fill their basket up with milk and bread and some other things. I do think that if you have any suggestions about, instead of just putting a row of apartments or a row of townhouses or a row of nursing home back there, I think there's probably other ways that we could address the transitioning or the feathering philosophy and the policy of the land use plan than just sticking something in there just to call it a feathering density.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Now, you know, when I look at on the map you handed out, 35 feet, I don't think that does it. I mean,
Okay.
30 for me, it doesn't do it. It's not that much. I mean, it's a car and a half. Well, we'll say 2 cars, as small as cars are today. That's not a lot.
That's the required buffer, so I mean, that would have to go in, no matter what. That wouldn't be something that is optional.
You know, as you state, you know, you've always done this. You're very respectful of your projects, of the people around it. If you come back, and I'm just pulling a number out of the air, you say 70 foot, well, that gets my attention a little bit. As I said earlier, I think you just need to go back and paint a little bit more of a picture, but then we still have the challenge, and this is where the trust factor comes in. We have the challenge of we're voting on a zone versus a project.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, and you sit on this side of the table more
Absolutely.
times than you're behind that. So you appreciate that.
Absolutely, I do, yes,
Yeah.
sir. So I could take back some notes. Are there some things that give you particular heartburn in a C1 that you would not like to see on that project? Because again, that is something that we could do. We do have the power. You have the power to be able to restrict certain uses. I think Commissioner St. Clair is exactly right. We can't say we're only going to earmark it for a grocery store and some other retail. But if there are some things that I would love to be able to go back and take a list to the grocery store folks and say, hey, these are some folks that we would like eliminated from this particular retail area. Are you comfortable with that? I assume they'll be comfortable with it. They've actually already eliminated quite a few because they're not excited about somebody doing a drugstore right out front to compete with their drugstore. So there's some concessions that we have to make to them to begin with. But that might be something. And then the other thing I'd like to hear is kind of the quid pro quo that we did with Old Stage Hills and Renaissance, where we had a 35-foot buffer, and we grew it. We actually added another 30 feet and made a 65-foot buffer. And Commissioner Honkin mentioned a 70-foot buffer. Does a 70-foot buffer make some folks more comfortable than they were talking about working through some of this? Now, keep in mind, you already have a 50-foot right-of-way that separates the residential from the commercial. So really, in true measurement, you're going to end up getting a 70-foot buffer plus another 50-foot right-of-way, and so you end up with 120 feet. But I'd like to see is there any consensus about what maybe the rest of the commission is thinking.
I'm taken a little bit of surprise by this, so I really need to think about it a little more to give you a list.
Okay.
I do take it will be brick, though.
Absolutely. You guys know better than that. You know how much I like brick.
No, I don't know if this helps or not, but you know, and this is obviously a much smaller piece of property. But you know, one of the selling points that has been thrown out here tonight has been the walkability of this. Okay, and I think that is a very important one if it can be pulled off properly. Well, when I hear walkability within the town, at least in my mind, the work that we put into the town center district, I think there's some features in there. I couldn't give them to you off the top of my head, And I know not everything that we put in there would be appropriate for this site. But I would ask you, if you're looking for some guidance, I'd pull that document, walk through it and say, okay, what can we take out of this? Because we put months into that. And if there's some of those that you think you can incorporate into this, that might be a good starting point.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, I was saying, what we're really trying to do is here is create an integrated neighborhood. And along those lines, you know, when you see these in other places, you don't tend to think in terms. I know it's going to be 60,000 square feet nominally if that's what goes in there, but again, the more that it can be viewed as a part of a neighborhood center, not a town center, but a neighborhood center.
Well,
that
dreamed
integrates with what's already there, like at Renaissance and what have you. And I think one of the things we had, and I think the beauty of when you were developing Renaissance is we had a lot of the individual property owners that gave us input that kind of moved us toward, you know, and plus the fact that we thought, you know, in the honor of your development, we also had some terrain advantages there too relative to how their property backed up against Renaissance and how that dropped off there too. So there were a lot of things that went into that discussion, and it worked out well. But we had a lot of input too from the residents too.
I would love to do a true mixed-use residential and commercial project, and that is something that I've not had the honor of putting together. This particular site, if I had 50 acres or 100 acres, I think it would be a great candidate to mix in residential, to mix in townhouses, maybe multifamily, and the retail and office. The challenge that I have here is I have a 30-acre tract of really about 18 to 20 really usable acres due to the fact that we have 6 acres of OSP, we have some topographical challenges next to the creek. And so unfortunately, this is the best candidate site for this particular use. And I understand, again, it's not about the use, it is about the zoning. And I just wanted to let you folks know that I'm very open-minded to it. I would love to maybe incorporate some things that you know, kind of like what we've talked about in the CLUP, that instead of just having sidewalks, maybe you have a little area that's a little dog park, or you have an area that does some things that really does incentivize people to be able to get out there and walk it or bike it. So I think there's some amenities like that we could look at, especially in some of these areas that maybe are harder to develop. I really don't want to get on the east side of the creek. I've kind of committed to the homeowner on the corner of Everett Road and Union Road that we're going to stay. We're not going to go to the east side of the creek, and quite frankly, to get to the east side of the creek, I'd have to build another bridge to get over to the east side of the creek. But I think there are some other opportunities for that. And again, I would love to be able to mix in some other things, but what we got to put in perspective, and this is real indicative of the parcels that we have left in the town. We don't have, with the exception of Eddie Ford's property, we don't have any big parcels that have any kind of potential for this kind of commercial or mixed use. And so we're dealing, not unlike the property on Boring Road, we're dealing with 20-acre, 30-acre parcels that are candidates for new development or redevelopment, and sometimes they're challenging, and they don't necessarily fit the utopian dream that we have of all this mixed use. As much as I would like to do it, it doesn't fit on this particular site, and I am landlocked to the west with the church, and I'm landlocked to the east with the creek.
Well, just a point of clarity, my comments were not intended that we would add residential mixed in with this. I don't see that happening with the size of the site. But I still think there are some features that we built into that plan that may be beneficial. You know, I like the term that Commissioner St. Clair, coined, a neighborhood center district. You know, one other thing is, a lot of people aren't that familiar with that open space that shows up here. This may be a little harsh, but it's probably the worst open space that one could have, because it's a mess, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do with it. It is what it is, but it's not the prettiest thing, and you can only put so much lipstick on that pig. But if you can put a little bit on there, it might help a little bit. I don't know how to do that, but it's not the prettiest. So And that's not your fault, it's just the way the property is there, so.
Well, it's no different than what Campbell Station Park was before the town of Farragut developed it. It's areas along a creek and where people enjoy the recreation of it.
But do you have the ability to make changes within that where it could have some of the features of?
Well, I don't think it's financially feasible for me to be able to get across the creek.
Well, but let's take you out of it just for a moment.
Okay.
Does the town itself have the ability? I mean, that's really some strange open space.
Well, a lot of that's floodway, and there's not much you can do in floodway.
Yeah, definitely you don't want to be in the floodway, but the floodplain.
The floodway is very wide there, and it's almost the floodplain. I mean, there's not much difference between the.
And really,
and
the town has envisioned, and there's on some maps, there is a walking trail that the town has envisioned going basically on the east side of that creek and tying Fox Run all the way over to the new Everett Road Bridge at Kingston Pike. And some of you may be familiar with that, the kind of the thoughts about this large bridge that we just built recently, that you could be able to run the walking trail underneath that bridge. Right. But above and beyond that, I think it would be challenging to do any kind of significant park-like improvements. And quite frankly, I mean, say you put a ball field in there, you're going to be out of room. And so, and then you got to deal with parking and all these other things. And I'm not sure that necessarily makes the most sense. It sure doesn't make financial sense for us to go to that kind of expense for public improvements as much as we would like to be able to build a park.
You know, let me provide some clarity on that, because I chose my words poorly. I didn't mean for you to make that area look better, but I would actually try to mask that area a little bit from the good part of the property here, because it just isn't pretty. So enough said on that. I mean, it is what it is, and I'm not looking to you to go in there and again use the great words, put lipstick on a pig, but maybe we just need to hide the pig a little bit. So
my instinct is that the folks, the residents that live at the corner, as well as the residents that live in Fox Run, would rather it be left alone and let the natural screening take its course. The Swan family, for many years, actually farmed that bottom land on that side of the creek, and they bush hogged it, and they baled hay on it. And then maybe 8 or 10 years ago, the Swan family said, phooey with it, I'm tired of having to bush hog it, and so they stopped bush hogging that, and it started to grow up into a bunch of small saplings and a natural screen. And we all know that typically natural screens are a lot better than a screen or a buffer that I go out there and plant, even though I have all good intentions, but we start with small plant material and it grows into big plant material, and it just takes time. But that's my thought. There is a sewer line that goes through there that First Utility District mows on a regular basis, and to me, somewhere along that sewer line easement would be the most appropriate spot for a walking trail for the town to be able to have the ultimate connectivity from Union Road all the way over. Ultimately, the thought has been to tie into McPhee Road and the McPhee Parks. And so, and obviously this would be one of the pieces of the puzzle that would make sense, and we would be delighted to accommodate that in any which way that we could.
Do we need to go on to 15, or have we been?
Oh, I think they
discussing
both
that
are
at the time?
interrelated, so we'll, I guess, workshop it again, and, you know, if you want to present some specifics to try to address some of their comments, we could do that.
Mr. Swan had one more quick comment.
I'd just like to make a final comment. So I guess this probably won't be the last time I see you guys over here. Thank you for letting us discuss it and talk about it. Your comment about a beautiful piece of property, we tend to feel the same way. Kind of when I rode into town this afternoon, and I still see the barn and the dairy over there. It's a unique piece of property. And one of the things working with Noah on this particular piece of property is he developed a piece across from the farm when my grandmother lived there. And so there's some confidence factor there with him doing the development piece. So, and I don't know if many of you know my uncle that lives here in town too, so he's got a lot of confidence with him as well. So anyway, I would appreciate your time tonight, and I hope the discussion can continue.
Thank you. All right, thanks.
Given us a lot to think about. So we're moving on to item number 16, discussion on a request for assisted living facility. on parcel 117, tax map 142, located on the south intersection of North Campbell Station Road and Heron Road, approximately 4.5 acres. Peter Falk for Autumn Care 2 LLC applicant, and this is also for discussion purposes only. There will be no vote
Well,
tonight.
I think we're all familiar with this property, and basically it's been before you twice. The last time was in September when the applicant had asked to come, and the property owners actually wanted to have a discussion with the Planning Commission and obtain more input from the public and the Commission on the possibility of an assisted living facility going on this property at the south intersection of Heron Road and North Campbell Station Road. My assessment of the feedback that they received in September was that it was generally positive. There were obviously some concerns still from residents of Cottage Creek mainly about this type of development on that property, but I think for the most part there seemed to be a little warming to that notion. I guess the issue as far as moving forward with this at this time is the property is currently zoned R2, and in order to have an assisted living facility, it's called elderly housing in the town zoning ordinance. There's really two options, and currently they could rezone it to the R6 or to general commercial. The staff, of course, and the applicant has not requested this, but the staff has always been consistent that we could not support commercial on that property, nor do I think it would have a very good chance to go very far. Then in the issue with the R6 is there's a 5-acre minimum lot size associated with that zoning district. It's a little unclear as to whether that would apply to elderly housing. I don't think it was really intended to apply to elderly housing. But then there's, as we've talked about this use in the past, it's been requested, at the previous property we just were talking about, and also on a property off Grigsby Chapel Road. So there's a need and a desire to have this type of use in the town. And I think it was Noah that mentioned maybe last month that we really needed to, or in September, maybe look at this more comprehensively. And maybe we need to consider creating a new zoning district or modifying one of our existing districts. So to me, there's really three options, and this is the point of this discussion from my perspective to get your all's feedback on. If we move forward with this, we could amend the R6 and make it more clear about whether the 5-acre applies to this type of use, and basically go with provisions that are associated with elderly housing. We could create a completely new zoning district, kind of a civic institutional district, because that is a use that's described in our land use plan, but we don't currently have a zoning designation for civic institutional. Or we could look at the current zoning district that we have that is most similar to civic institutional, and that's community service. And that zoning district, frankly, has hardly ever been used. We have a few of those in our zoning ordinance, unfortunately. And my concern with trying to create a new zoning district is we're just creating yet another, district that may or may not get a lot of use. And I would prefer, from the staff's perspective, to basically replace the S1 zoning district with a more functional, a more comprehensive type civic institutional zoning district that could accommodate a smaller project like what is envisioned on this property, as well as potentially something on properties that are more than 10, 15 acres where you could have, a freestanding facility, but then you could also have maybe, detached, independent living villas that could also act as transitional elements that would be consistent with our land use plan and our architectural design standards. So I really wanted to get your feedback on that, and then some if a new zoning district or replacement zoning district were envisioned, how you felt about some really different ways of looking at how we do land use in the town. In terms of building placement in relation to roadways, like in the case of this property, I think I would recommend relaxing the front yard setbacks in a new civic institutional district to give more flexibility, like with Noah's request in the previous item. If we have more flexibility in the C1 to allow the building to be brought up closer to Kingston Pike, maybe that would allow for more of a natural transition area to the north in that case. And similar in this type of application, to really look at the setback requirements, to look at our buffer provisions. And buffer to me implies separation and isolation. And what I think we need to start thinking about, at least from my perspective, is integration and how we can have uses that are different, but they are separated, but they're integrated. And you can do that with form, like with a larger piece of property, having, something that's visually comparable around the periphery where it abuts, lower density residential, for example. Or you could do it with, in the case of a single facility like this property, perhaps more, interesting corridors of open space, pocket park areas, again, allowing the building to be moved up closer to the street would give you more flexibility to build that kind of more naturalized buffer, but that buffer would also provide for connectivity to what's around it so that you're creating this larger sense of community. So to me, that's kind of a new way of looking at things, and there's, this could also be incorporated into some of our stormwater stuff that deals with low impact development, providing for more visually appealing parking lot settings, for example, to provide for a better transition to where something that could be kind of quasi-residential but quasi-commercial in appearance could blend in more visually with a lower density residential neighborhood that might be around it. So,
Mark, what other things would you include in a civic institution setting besides
well, I would look at what's permitted in S1. I mean, I think schools, churches, parks, government buildings, those kinds of things would be all uses that you would commonly see in civic institutional.
So an assisted living nursing home type thing is considered institutional?
It's one of those that's kind of one of those uses that's a little bit of a lot of things. It's got some commercial element to it. It's got some institutional element to it, and it's got some certainly residential element to it. So it's a little kind of a hybrid of a lot of things. We'd have to pretty much overhaul the S1. It would be completely different because if you look at the intent statement of S1, it wouldn't fit what I'm envisioning for that. But again, that's up to you all, which direction you feel would be most appropriate to deal with this. I'm just trying to think of something that we could apply in other areas of the town and that would give us some flexibility on larger parcels to allow freestanding buildings that would act as transitional form elements to the existing plan of development around that property. It might take, that's going to take some time to develop something like that, but I think we could be working on some, putting together some sections of language that we could try to build on and try to create something that would be really innovative and give people flexibility and provide for transition rather than buffering.
Well, and it protects other pieces of property which may be more suitable for commercial. It would protect neighborhoods, residential, from that commercial. Once it's zoned into that, it's not zoned.
Yeah, because we'd be looking at the presentation of the parking lot. You know, we'd be looking at decorative parking lot lights for something like this. That you break up the parking lot like we talked about with Chili's into pods, and maybe a lot of, you know, heavy landscaping to really take something that could be commercial looking, but make it look kind of residential, with just, you know, more parking spaces, but still give it kind of a residential feel. So those are some of the things that I think I would suggest building into that type of zoning district. I think the R6 has got a little bit of baggage from some of the discussions that we've had with other projects, and maybe the civic institutional might be something that it would. First of all, it's a use that's described in our plan, but which we don't currently have, which I think reflects a need, and it may give us an opportunity to address other requests like that may occur in other different parts of the town.
Mark, I think what might be beneficial for this group, and I probably won't be here long enough to be a party to the bulk of the conversation, but you've obviously given this a lot of thought, and you have some good ideas with this. I would suggest that you craft your comments into a document that the board can review and then go through the bullets and you know, modify it according to the wishes of the board as a whole. I do think we need to go along the line as to what you've stated. Specific to this piece of property, there's obviously a tremendous amount of concern and a fair amount of support for this change as well. This is where I'm at. I think if we can put the proper controls in place, and I like the term you used here just a few minutes ago about having a bit of a neighborhood feel to it, I think is how you worded it. I think if we can craft that into adding to the zone that you were discussing, I think we can have a project that has been proposed on this type of property, protect the residents, protect this key avenue into our community, and find a balance between all the issues that have been raised. So I could support that if we can get some of these things accomplished that have already been mentioned.
I said, I think it protects neighborhoods from getting a zoning of commercial and then down the road, maybe whatever is original intent doesn't get done, but they still have protection to not have Walmart there.
Proliferation of R6, but that's not really what you're looking for. I mean, there's enough mixed kind of understanding of R6 that we don't even go there and creating a new zone. I don't think we need to, if we can do the S1 modification, get the right language in there, I'd much rather do that than create another zone.
Yeah, because really we don't use the S1.
Making these things consistent with some things we've already got in place.
Yeah, the S1's really never hasn't been used in years, and so I'm thinking that might be something that we could replace and make it more flexible and functional.
That's by far the best idea is take that S1 and construct it to take care of these issues that have come to light on the commercial, residential, institutional things. I look back over the years, NHC built their facility, which was zoned commercial.
Yeah, that's right.
It's still zoned commercial, but there's tremendous opposition from from like Foxden and all the areas in there, as well as Sugarwood, for having a real commercial on that property, and NHT turned out to be by far the best option. And it has been a fine project, one of the most highest rated facilities of its type, and completely compatible with the neighborhood.
Yeah, definitely been a good neighbor.
My comments have been reduced to one now. And I do think we need to keep in mind that we don't need an elderly housing place on every entrance to this town, and this is a major entrance. I hate for Farragut to be known for the town where old folks live. Well, you know, some people think I'm one, but I don't think I'm one. But I do think we need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think the providing for housing choice is in the land use plan, and it's not just talking about the elderly, but it's also talking about young professionals, people that are just out of college, to provide a housing option for them as well. So I think that's just one element of it. I don't think we would envision elderly housing all over the town, but that may be determined by the market. But I'd like a mixture myself of both, to address the housing need that was identified in our land use plan.
Provided enough input
Well,
to
I
you.
think, yeah, it sounds like maybe the S1 is trying to do something with that and try to put together some concrete points for discussion.
I would agree with what Ron said, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good. I just needed a little more direction before I went to start doing that, to know that was really what your all's preference was.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm Gary Mahoney, 11522 Cottage Creek, and I appreciate many of the comments that I've heard here tonight. As a matter of fact, I was at a workshop meeting on Monday, and that Mark did a real good job. Agreed with many of the points he said and that he conveyed to you this evening. But I'm here to really to oppose this going in, and the reason being is that Farragut's had a policy, a historic policy in my opinion, and a high priority policy of protecting Campbell Station Road and protecting the existing residents. And as Mark was saying there, I don't think it's a good idea to change some of the minimum standards, such as the 5 acres, for example. Also, we were talking about the changing to R6. When you got R2, and then they're butted up against each other, and then one becomes R6. I think that's a little bit much, and I liked what Mark was saying about and there's been a lot of talk tonight about transition. And I think that transition doesn't need to go from R2 to R6. To me, it should be, as we talked about maybe some Monday there, about R2 to R3, R4, or the what is it, OSR? I believe that is called. And really, I think when you go to that upper level of the R's with the R6s, you're sort of opening up Pandora's box to some degree for everything. And I was thinking about on the way over here about the beginning of the commercialization, and I was glad to hear about not wanting Campbell Station Road to be commercialized. But then when I started thinking about that R6 and it being built there, I thought on the way over here, well, the first thing's going to happen, The property assessor, he's going to say that's commercial. The trustee's going to say that's commercial. The Treasury Department's going to say that's commercial. The comptrollers, they're going to say that's commercial. So that's my way of thinking about that anyhow. And one of the things that we talked about Monday too, there's a list of terms of which were right at the top of the list there. Mark, if you remember, we talked about that I think are really important. And if you want these terms to really hit home, all you got to do is go out on Campbell Station Road, and they are like the heart of the community, the traffic management, heritage, and the image. So as most of you know, you can go out on Campbell Station Road on any day, any time, and look back toward Farragut, right into the heart of Farragut, and you're going to see all the way to the Smoky Mountains, and you're going to see what an outstanding job the town of Farragut does in keeping Campbell Station Road looking really great. It's beautiful, especially in the spring with the daffodils on one side and a park on the other. Matter of fact, I'm looking forward to what is it next week? We're having the lighting of the park, I believe, and you know, I can't even tell you how many people are involved in with their cameras out and all the special events that take part over there. So with that in mind, and also you can, like I said, any day, anytime, you'll see people jogging, walking on the sidewalk. We've got the bicycle or bike paths on the side of the road. All those are wonderful things. And I guess I'll end by saying that, and I got this out of the Farragut Handbook that says, and I quote, today Farragut's best asset is the number of attractive, well-maintained residential neighborhoods. And I would recommend that we keep Campbell Station Road that way. Thank you.
My name is Bill Tuller, 11519 Cottage Creek Lane, and I've been here before. I actually have a question, and the question has to do, and I'm probably asking you all this, has to do with what we're looking at up here. In the September meeting that we had here, due to the curve and the downhill, the architect moved the entranceway down towards Campbell Station Road. And my question is, on the Campbell Station Road side of that entrance, and I think that's just drawn in pencil from the last time and isn't part of anything that's actually been measured, what's the distance between the Campbell Station side of that entranceway and the sidewalk? You're going to have commercial traffic, trucks making that left-hand turn and then an immediate right-hand turn, and that's already, you know, you're going up the hill and around the curve. It just seems like a difficult place to me. And I don't think this drawing tells us, and I'd love to know what that distance is. Thank you. Nobody answered my question.
I don't know.
No, nobody knows.
We don't know the
the
distance.
answer.
Yeah, the scale down here I can't read, so I can't even guess it.
Peter Falk, 9122 Links View Drive, Knoxville. The traffic engineer that went out and looked at this for us recommended that location, and I think he also recommended that there would be a decel lane off to the right of that, so that would actually be out of the flow of traffic when any turns were made into that driveway. And also, as far as the transition, I think that zoning is an 80-foot setback requirement for that facility. And if I'm the owner developer, I can also make that as residential looking as that requirement would require. We already like to make them look like a residence, and if there's any specific recommendations on that, we'd be happy to comply with that.
Steve Brown, 953 Cave Springs Road, Cullowhee, North Carolina, and a member of the Heron family. The main thing I would say, though, I don't want to reiterate all the things that the family's said before, but the Heron family, I can speak for our family. We're very pleased with the idea of civic institutional zoning. For several years, we had viewed this as an ideal type of opportunity for that property. As we mentioned before, it's been for sale for 22 years. There has been no residential interest. All of the interest has been for things that would be far less appealing to the entranceway to Farragut. And we view this as a great opportunity for our heritage to leave a final contribution from the sale of our farm to the community. And we appreciate the work that's been done to look at a way that works for everybody. So very, very pleased with the civic institutional idea. Thank you.
I would just say quickly, I'm Elmer Parlier, 4027 Liberty Church Road, Corbin, Kentucky, member of the Heron family. We have vetted this pretty thoroughly in this forum previously. I think the thrust of our argument is that if there is resistance to assisted living, elder housing, then what is the alternative to it? And we have presented what that might look like under current zoning, and it's certainly not as appealing. I appreciate Mr. Mahoney's comments about the appearance, but I think all would agree, and I think we distributed 850 flyers to the adjoining rural routes, and clearly demonstrated that what Mr. Falk proposes is an attractive facility, largely hidden by proper landscaping. We also had some discussion of lighting. We sent Mark a picture of one of Mr. Falk's facilities at night, and he thought it was a scrap picture because he thought it showed nothing. That was the point, no lights. Traffic, Alden Childress actually drew this into the architect's plan and presented testimony here about the safety of that entranceway. So we're pleased with that and think that's acceptable. I guess that's all I would add. Traffic is largely a neutral issue. That's an Alden Childress from industry studies about this kind of property compared to residential. And while there is slightly more traffic, it's in the middle of the day, not the peak times of morning and afternoon. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have, but most of those arguments are on the record already.
I'm Ken Chipley, 11602 Gates Mill, and I want to say that I think that the changes to the S1 and modifications broadening the S1 community institutional would be a great thing for these things. I was here a couple of years ago when the guy did the presentation for the one down on Grigsby Chapel. We had the same confusion then, and so I think that this would be a great help toward cleaning up these things. We wouldn't be afraid of the commercial or R6 type zoning on these types of properties in that case. And again, I've seen their pictures we also got the two houses on right there next to Sonia that show us exactly what this is going to look like. It's going to be backs up of houses with a mix of privacy fences and hopefully a privacy fence. They don't have to have a privacy fence. So we're going to end up with the back end of a bunch of small houses up against Campbell Station Road. And if you don't do this, that's going to be the alternative. Leave it R2, and we're going to end up with 5 or 6 or 7 houses with their mismatched privacy fences. Or he showed the boats and the pickup trucks up on blocks in the car in the picture. That's probably that could be there. I've driven through Stonecrest lately, and there's cars on blocks in Stonecrest. So it could happen anywhere. And so
I think this looks a lot better, and this kind of preserves the corner there for a long time to come, in my opinion. I'm not objecting to old people. In fact, I got to put my parents in a life care facility next week after Thanksgiving, and I think, thank God they're there. So y'all have a good day.
Any more questions or comments?
Mark, I assume that architectural standards and landscaping standards would extend into this district as well, correct?
Yeah, that's one thing that you wouldn't have if, like I think the comment's been made, if it were developed as single-family detached, there wouldn't be any architectural standards that could apply or additional landscaping. And what I would envision us working on with Civic Institutional would, I mean, whatever you build there would have to comply with the architectural design standards, and then how we would provide for separation without isolation, you know, with transitions and natural areas, you know, I think would be something you would also be able to do with that, and you wouldn't be able to do that with single-family residential. So there would be those advantages to that.
Okay, any more questions, comments? Any new utilities at this point?
That's it. That's it.
The November 19th, 2015 meeting is adjourned.
It started out fast. It didn't stay that way.